Good afternoon. It's 5:30. We will go ahead and call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. Please let the record show that Secretary Rudy Garcia is not here and will not be attending tonight's meeting. Let's now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and the salute to the New Mexico flag in English and in Spanish, and then please stay standing for the acknowledgement of tribal land. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Juro fidelidad a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América y a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the Zia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures. Saludo la bandera del Estado de Nuevo México, el símbolo de amistad perfecta entre culturas unidas. We acknowledge the original people of the land, the Tesuque Pueblo people, and other tribal nations, and ask them to walk with us today as we share and learn together. Thank you. We are on to approval of the agenda. I would like to move, at the request of the NEA president, the union update. Let's move it to below the consent agenda, but before action items, if that's all right.
Sure.
And if she gets here, we can always bring it up. Before action items, after consent.
That's where it is now.
No, right now it's after public forum.
So after consent and before
Yeah,
action.
moving it basically down to the bottom of the bottom of the page, first page. Yes, the NEA is conducting candidate interviews tonight, and this was her request in order to give her time to get here. Okay, with that change, any other changes to the agenda? If not, may I have a motion?
I move we approve the agenda.
I'll second it.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. All right, we are on to the introduction of the interpreter, Mr. Martinez.
Good afternoon, Board President Noble, board members, Superintendent Dr. Garcia, community members, and leadership team. My name is Germán Martinez, and I'll be providing any service for translation. If anybody would like services, please raise your hand, and I'll provide those services at the back of the room. Buenas tardes, Presidente Noble, miembros de la Junta Escolar, y miembros, Superintendente, Doctora García, miembros de la comunidad. Mi nombre es Germán Martínez y serviré como traductor. Si alguien ocupa esos servicios, por favor, levante la mano y provee atrás de la sala. Gracias.
Thank you. On to item number 3 on the agenda, the school board showcase. And we are starting with the Acequia Madre Computer Science Initiative. I believe we are starting with a video. Is that correct? Yeah. An interactive video. Okay, so at this point, it's probably worth maybe each of you as I read your, interactive video. Should I read your names? Let me introduce the students. Malachi Escobedo. Wave to the crowd. Malachi, there we go. Pippa Barrett. There's Pippa. Abigail Swigert. Olive Keys. Ileana Sandoval. Okay, here we go with the video.
Let's get Well done. Thank you very much, Ileana, Olive, Abby, Pippa, and Malachi. Great work. And great use of the video. That was pretty spectacular. Okay, as they break down, oh, here's some comments that I was meant to say. Just experienced the integration of academic rigor, creative performing arts, and computer science skills. Those young chefs will shared their secret recipe that makes Acequia Madre such a special school. So we got that. Thank you. Okay, next up we have the Capitol High School Band, complete with 3 tubas, under the direction of Ricardo Hernandez. Do you want to come up and introduce what you'll be playing?
Good evening. The Capitol High School Band will be performing a couple of selections for you. One of them is called All Star, which you may remember from the movie Shrek. Then we're going to play another band arrangement written specifically for a marching band called Crunch Time, or as I like to call it at the football games, El Tiempo de Crunch. And we're going to conclude with the Capitol High School fight song. first chairs. We had Juan Carlos Rodriguez on trombone. Clarinet, we had Danelia Torres. Mateo Munoz. Andrew Perez. Tuba, first chair, Manuel Bojote. And also percussion, we had Adolfo Rodriguez back there. And also we had Ever Chavez, who was first chair percussion in the entire district. So we're real proud of you. Percussion, lights on. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Wonderful job. Thank you to all the members of the band. Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Much appreciated. Good stuff. Fun fact, I played the bass clarinet for a summer. You don't see a lot of those. Okay, we are moving on to public forum. And we have, I'm sure some people signed up for public forum. Is there anyone who wanted to speak who did not get a chance to sign up for public forum? Okay, going once? Going twice? Okay. If you would go up and write your name down, anybody. This is your one last chance to sign up for public forum if you did not get a chance to on the way in. And Dr. Ryan will then take us through the rules for public forum, and we will go there.
President Noble, I know someone who's running late. They texted me and said they're going to want to, if we're already done with public forum, then we're done.
Okay.
But if they have the opportunity, just
Okay.
give you a heads up. Thank you.
For the ground rules for public forum, please listen and speak with respect. No uncivil conduct will be permitted. Please do not discuss any specific student who is not your own, and there's no sharing of time. Self-monitor, observe the 3-minute time limit, and I will give you a warning when there's 30 seconds left in your 3 minutes. Public commentary and dialogue is allowed only during the public forum, not throughout the meeting. Please search for answers on common ground. You may speak on any topic, whether it's on the agenda or not. Your input will be taken into consideration. And please be advised that the board may discuss your issue during the meeting, but by law cannot take action on items that are not on our agenda. President Noble, members of the board, and Superintendent Garcia, we have 10 people that are signed up for public forum. I would ask that you line up over here on the side in the order that I call you, and please repeat your name to the board so that we can document it and record it in our minutes. Our first speaker is Katie Arnold, and then it's Ian and Damien. And then Whitney Baca, yes, right over here, please. And then I will call the rest as we get closer.
Thank you to the school board for the opportunity to speak. I am here on behalf of the concerned and committed parents of Acequia Madre. And my name is Katie. I am a mother of 2 daughters in 4th and 6th grade at Acequia. I'm also a writer and a journalist, and I've written about raising inquisitive, healthy children for national publications, including Outside Magazine and the New York Times, for more than a decade. But today I'm going to speak first and foremost as a parent. When I think of Acequia Madre, I think of strength in community and inclusivity. The school fosters creativity, confidence, and connection, both in the classroom and outside of it. I think Acequia's one of its greatest gifts is its size, its small size. I know that's up for review tonight, and I want to speak about the size. From the day my daughters, Pippa and Maisie, started at Acequia, they have been known by their first names to all in the school, and this is teachers and students across all grades. This creates for our children a sense of security and recognition that are so important to their well-being, to their willingness to take risks, their emotional resilience, and their intellectual curiosity. Being known and recognized is a basic human need. It's what we all want, and they get it at Acequia every single day, and during such a formative time in their lives. As a mother, this is more important to me than any test score, though our test scores at Acequia are pretty great. Central to this is the buddy system at Acequia. You saw that on the video, that 6th graders pair with kindergartners, and this helps the younger children feel comfortable, connected, and looked after. And as a parent of a 6th grader, I can also tell you firsthand how much the 6th graders love being role models and mentors to their younger friends. This sense of community really breaks down any cliques in Acequia Madre and creates this feeling of being one family. And I have never witnessed a school with a tighter bond than Acequia, and it often gives me the feeling of goosebumps when I walk in the door. And if we as parents feel it in the 5 minutes that we spend at school during drop-off or pickup, think of the positive impact on our children spending 8 hours a day in this nurturing, welcoming environment. The second thing, and I know I'm probably running out of time, is the neighborhood school is so important to both to our children and to our neighborhoods. It teaches children to have a relationship with their neighbors and their neighborhood. And my children bicycle or walk to school almost every day. And this gives them independence that they wouldn't have if they were riding a bus or being dropped off. And going to a neighborhood school teaches our children to be good neighbors, considerate, respectful, and I think we'd all agree that these are life skills that we'd want for our children. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Board President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent Garcia. Hi, my name is Ann Reister.
Hello, my name is Damian Medina.
We are 2 4th graders from Francis X. Nava Elementary.
We don't want you to close Nava
Or EJ.
or Acequia Madre.
All schools matter to us.
I think that school closure is inappropriate in this situation. There are many reasons to support Nava's growth. We should be working on keeping our education reachable throughout Santa Fe instead of limiting our options. Also, some of Santa Fe's students need smaller schools like Nava.
We won first place in the historical parade. We have awesome students, teachers, and parents. We have an amazing school spirit and unbreakable bond. We make every moment a teaching moment. We also had the best growth for ELA testing in the whole district and the second best in math growth.
Our schools are important. We need Nava.
We love our school.
We have Whitney Baca, and I'm not sure on this, Moggy, there we go, thank you. Heather Burke and Maya Del Margo.
Hello, President Noble, board members, Superintendent Garcia. I'm here to speak. My name is Whitney Bacon. I'm here to speak about Acequia Madre and the school closure of other schools as well. And I wanted to sort of phrase it differently for you guys. And the way I wanted to phrase it is sometimes communities are hard to rebuild. So once you close something, going backwards can often be hard and if not impossible. And I just want you consider that when you're thinking towards the future, that once you close something, sometimes it's hard to get it back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi. Excuse me. Kate, everybody here at the board, thank you. My name is Moggy Alley. I have 3 children, 2 of which have already been through the public school systems. And then I had a 3rd one and had a tough time kind of figuring out where he was going to go. And my oldest is 23, my middle is 20, and my youngest is 6. And when we found Acequia, I don't even know how to explain how fantastic it is, but it is more than just a community school. It is a family. It is a group of parents that not only love our students and we all look out for all of our children, we look out for each other. It is a bond that we have created, and we work really hard to keep that bond going. And I don't know of any other school, and I've been around a lot of the schools for the past 20 years. I've never seen a school with a bond like this, and especially with our teachers, our administrators. And when my son goes to school, he hugs everybody, boys, girls, teachers. They hold hands. It is nurtured. At so many schools, you see touching as a negative. It's not allowed. And to me, and especially now, we live in this time where we need to hug, we need to talk, we need to show affection. This is one of the few schools where it's actually really, really, really important. And everybody understands that. And they encourage these children to hug, to hold hands, to walk in the playground, to walk down the street. It doesn't even matter. And I just find that right now, if we don't keep a school like this alive, so many children, I know we're a small school, but we are so precious. And this community, we do cleanup days with the Acequias. We do so many things. We walk to school as well as Kate's kids. And it's so great to be able to see our neighbors. We see Canyon Road. We've become so much more than just a school. We are truly a family. And I hope that everybody takes this into consideration because it's an amazing group of people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we will have Heather Burke, then Maya Del Margo, Desiree Sanchez, and Rachel Kleinfield.
Hi, my name is Heather Burke. I am a former PTA president at Nava Elementary. I'm a homeowner in that district, and I'm now an attorney that handles discrimination issues for people. I wrote a policy paper on this subject because I knew it would come up again. I did 2 years of research about this subject, and there's a long history of systemic discrimination in Santa Fe public schools that marginalizes students based on color and language and disability. And the problem that the school district faces at this point is that this discussion of school closures in any direction will only advance that discrimination rather than stepping back and seeing what we can do about it. If you look at the disparate sizing in school zoning, for example, there are completely different and disparate numbers of students allowed to go to each school in zone. You have downtown schools, which in zone can only support 300, they only have about 378 students in the 4 downtown schools in their in zone, whereas that's smaller than the schools we're building on the south side. This is not an equal educational benefit to give to each student. Now, we all probably are familiar at this point with Yazzie versus Martinez. This has established students' constitutional right to an equal and equitable education, and the students in Santa Fe are not receiving that right now. They are receiving different amounts of benefits and different amounts of teacher ratios and student ratios, even if their classroom sizes stay similar. And this has never been shown by any kind of studies to be a beneficial thing to students. They can show that it may not directly harm them, but it never helps them. So I'm here to argue that the school board should step back and wait till we can address the long-term denial of maintenance to certain schools that has now placed them in the crosshairs for closure, when other schools that would have been better suited to close in the past were not addressed in that same way. And I think, even though I would never advocate and do not advocate for closing any of our schools in our city, I think that we have to address the CRC being largely white in a city that is not white, that has citizens on it that can benefit financially from their decisions, such as selling houses in the districts of schools that they rebuild, and there is evidence of that in the Atalaya School District. I think, again, I'm not advocating for any school closures, but I think that there is tremendous amount of evidence of objectively unreasonable decision-making to fund some schools and not fund other schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Maya Del Margo, then Desiree Sanchez, Rachel Kleinfeld, and Sarah Guzman.
President Noble, members of the board, Superintendent Garcia, my name is Maya Del Margo, and I am the parent of 2 boys who attend Nava Elementary. The last time I stood here in front of you, I told you that I perceived that there was a significant difference in the educational experiences at the elementary level from one end of town to the other. I still think that's true. And Member Cashman, I heard you say in response that you felt that this created resentment in our community. And I think that's true. Board President Noble, I heard you say at the following meeting that you didn't want to see it look like that. You didn't want it to be a tale of 2 cities. And looking at this agenda and reading what you wrote, Board President Noble, in the newspaper in the My View, I am standing here tonight to say thank you to all of you, because I see a group of individuals who's willing to look at a tough topic in our community, a hard look at a hard subject, and I appreciate your willingness to do that. Nava is doing great. Twice you guys have voted to give us a chance to do good things, and we're doing great things. We were predicted to have 175 students. We've got 226. Our hidden gem is not so hidden anymore. Our transition SBA scores are up. We have the most growth in the district in language arts and the second highest growth in the district in math. And as a resident of the neighborhood for the past 17 years, I can tell you that I am seeing more families with young children moving into our neighborhood than I've seen the whole time I've lived there. This is a great situation. Plus, we won the float. You know, historical, hysterical. So Nava is doing great, and I want to say thank you. The other thing that I would like to say is that there are days when I don't feel so good about the world. I wonder if human beings are ever going to get it right on this planet. And those are the days that I visit Nava. I walk in there, I see Mr. Ducharme giving a high five to every kid walking in off the parking lot. I see the way that the teachers and the students connect. They look at each other, they smile, they ask for each other's best, they celebrate victories, they push through challenges. I know that when I walk into Nava, I need to take my best self, because that's what everybody there is already doing. So, I'm going to end with an invitation to all of you. If you're having a rough day and you've got 5 minutes, you should swing by Nava. You should stop by, catch a little bit of the buzz, and see just how much fun the Thunderbirds are having as they change the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Desiree Sanchez, followed by Rachel Kleinfeld, Sarah Guzman, and Amy Thayer.
Good evening, President Noble, board members. This is my third time being up here, and I can't say that it gets any easier, especially when it comes to wanting to shut down my son's school. I've been emotional. I've come with some facts that I found, and I'm just going to try and keep it straight and to the point. When this first came up, I kind of didn't like what Ms. Noble was saying as we've come through these couple years. I think she's actually taking the smarter approach and wanting to step back, look at what needs to be done and not rush it. Ms. Cashman, you said the last time that if we tabled this, you didn't want to see it again, and I find it very ironic that you're bringing it up again, especially when you're leaving in November and you're vacating your seat. So I just feel like there's kind of ulterior motives to wanting to shut EJ. Mr. Carrillo, you represent EJ Martinez, and I think you do not do a good job. You are only there for us now that you are running for re-election, and I think you need to step up and really be there for the schools. Ms. Noble is looking at this in a fresh set of eyes, and I think the board needs new set of eyes. So just kind of reconsider. Let's stop, have actual community conversations with parents, everybody that's involved. Like the gentleman said, once you close these, how hard is it going to be to rebuild these schools? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Rachel Kleinfeld, then Sarah Guzman, and Amy Thatcher, and Dr. Carmen Gonzalez.
Thank you, President Noble and members of the board. This is my first time here. I'm the parent of two girls. One is pre-K, 4.5-year-old, and one is 15 months old, so she's a future student of Santa Fe Public Schools. And we're back. My husband grew up here in Santa Fe. We left for a long time. It's hard to find jobs in Santa Fe. And we're back to raise our family here. And as we hit the fall this year, I went and started visiting kindergartens, because that's what you do when you've got a 4.5-year-old. And so we visited a lot of the kindergartens around this city, and I must say, there are some gems, some really amazing schools that we have in our district. Acequia Madre is one of those gems. It is a phenomenal school, and having never set foot in there other than for a visit, you can see as soon as you walk in, not just what's special about the culture there, but what's special about the educators. And I really want to talk about teachers because I work in good governance and organizational change. That's what I do during the day. And all of the research on organizations shows that culture is the hardest thing to build, and that once it's destroyed, culture is gone. You learn that about business mergers, you learn that about nonprofit organizations. Culture is that magic something that is really hard to create and very easy to destroy. And one of the most important parts of culture is the leadership and the teachers. Teachers are educators who have been around for a long time, who know how to teach. It's a hard thing to do. You can be a great teacher by birth, but it often takes a little time to get your sea legs, as it were. And schools that have teachers that have chosen to stick around and deliver excellence year after year, that, once you break it up, won't come back. Those teachers, once they move to other places, won't be able to bring the same kind of situation, the magic something, into their classrooms. And all the research shows that teachers are the #1 most important thing to a school, to a kid's education, more important than the size of the school, more important than resources or computers or money or anything. It's the educators. And I get that hard choices have to be made. I appreciate when I moved here, I was stunned by the level of student homelessness, by the inequities in the school system. I've seen the schools in the South as well as my area, and frankly was just blown away by the challenges that you have to deal with running this whole district. One of the things that blew me away was these huge new schools, these 1,000-kid schools that you have for grade school kids. I mean, imagine taking your kid to a 1,000-kid school when they've only been in a home daycare or a small daycare, being watched over by friends and family and so on. It's terrifying. And so I just want to say, I really hope that you'll consider the magic of culture and the importance it delivers before closing some of these schools like Acequia that are so important. And I hope that you'll also consider expanding districts. I don't think the goal is to keep kids out. I think the goal is to bring more kids in. And instead of transferring, bring them in naturally. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, Sarah Guzman, Amy Thayer, Dr. Carmen Gonzalez, and Fred Nathan is our last speaker.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. So I'm a mother of two, and I decided to stay home. And I'm zoned for Nava. My daughter, Valentina, goes to a Madre. She's a first grader. And I, too, concur with everything the previous speaker said. I was a stay-at-home mom, and so for me it was very scary to send my daughter to a huge school. And like I said, I was zoned for Nava, and I put in a transfer, and I was 67th on the wait list for a Madre on the second tier. So a lot of people had to say no to that spot. And another speaker earlier said that there wasn't an equal opportunity. The opportunity's there. I was 67th and I got in. So everybody just, needs to apply. I think it's an equal process to getting in. The other thing I wanted you to know was a few statistics about our school. 1/4 of our student population are economically disadvantaged. That means that 1 in 4 qualify for free or reduced lunch. 17% of our student population have disabilities. 35% are Hispanic students like my daughter and second language learners. I picked a Madre as one of the choices for transferring because I thought they were in a historical building. I didn't think I would be having to come before you to ask or to plea that you not close our school. I thought that my community school, Nava, since they had been in the paper, that was probably not a good choice for us because I didn't want my daughter to transition to multiple schools. I know what that's like. I went to multiple schools growing up. So our school, let's talk a little bit about the data. Looking at the school grading system, the LFC and the PED are gonna continue to look at those things. I really don't know why the school district is not looking at a Madre as a model school to try to replicate in larger schools or in other schools in the district. Because again, our numbers are there. And the LFC and the legislators tend to really like numbers. So they tend to really look at, well, how are the children progressing in those schools? What is the numbers telling us? What are we getting back for the investment that we're putting in? I would like to know why we aren't, as a district, joining with other districts who also receive this small school size adjustment size adjustment cut, and why we aren't looking at going back to the LFC and trying to find some other solutions for funding, because the funding is there. We have an immensely large closed fund that people aren't looking at, and that's our reserve. And people have brought it up, but nobody goes back to the state and actually challenges them, and why we aren't really using that as a priority for funding our schools.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Amy Thayer, and then Dr. Carmen Gonzalez, and then Fred Nathan.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Amy Thayer, and I'm the mother of a first grader at Acequia Madre Elementary. And I just wanted to add to the perspectives that we've heard here tonight with sort of an outsider perspective. I moved to Santa Fe only 6 years ago. My husband works up at Los Alamos, and I understand that the labs there are hiring about 1,200 people right now, looking to hire about 1,200 more in the coming years. And I think those individuals, like my family, are looking at Santa Fe as a great place to live, a nice place with many outdoor activities to offer children a slower pace of life, a wonderful sense of community. But they also need to know that there's going to be great opportunities here to educate their children. Many of the people who move here and are looking to take jobs, whether they be at the lab or medical positions in our hospitals here, they have young children, and they need to know that those children will be well educated and have a bright future here if they move to Santa Fe. So that's one of the reasons why I think you really need to consider the type of message that you send to the broader community and people who are looking to come here when you consider closing a gem like Acequia Madre. That school has very devoted parents. It has parents who are raising money to give their children violin lessons in school, extra art education, gardening programs. It's a very strong community, and a community that has done extremely well academically, especially relative to other schools in the state. And by closing a school like that, you would really be sending a message to other families with young children to tell them that young children are not our priority. We have other priorities here in Santa Fe, and I don't think that that is the message that you want to send when you are trying to get young people, middle-aged people, to come here and to work as doctors, as nurses, to fill positions in the lab up in Los Alamos. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our last two speakers, Dr. Carmen Gonzalez and then Fred Nathan.
Bring this down. Good afternoon, members of the board, President Noble, and Superintendent Garcia. My name is Carmen Gonzalez, and I'm running for School Board District 1. And I want to be on the record to say that I am not for closing schools. I appreciate President Noble's approach to put together a task force to look at some creative solutions that we might have. And so that's where I'm at. And as a child, I got to attend a neighborhood school. And I walked to school, I came home for lunch, and I walked home. So I appreciate neighborhood schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, President Noble and members of the board. Thank you for opening this, and Superintendent Garcia, thank you for this forum and allowing this public comment. I think the bottom line in education is not dollars, it's teaching and learning. And any decision, thank you, any decision ought to be based on whether this is in the best interests of the students in terms of their education. There's 4 decades of research that show that students perform better in smaller schools. In terms of elementary schools, that means about 400 students or less. I spent a year of my life actually researching this topic and collecting the research, and I happen to have a report that we put out back in 2008 that I'd like each one of you to read. But to just quickly summarize, it shows not only do students tend to do better in smaller schools, but there are higher satisfaction levels among students, parents, teachers, and principals. You know, we've been down this road before. As you may remember, in 2010, 3 small schools, 3 neighborhood schools in our community were closed: Alvord, Connie, and Larragoite. We were told at the time by the then superintendent that the achievement of those students, by the way, those kids were 77% free and reduced lunch. They were the weakest, most marginalized people in our community. And their parents came here and asked your predecessors not to close their schools. But the district went ahead, and the then superintendent said that achievement would go up, not down. Well, what happened was those kids were all consolidated into a very large school designed by a prison architect and repurposed to be a school. That's a fact. Aspen School. And their scores, in fact, went down, sadly, as we predicted they would. Their proficiency rates are lower today than they were in their previous small schools. So I would encourage you, before you close any schools, to revisit that decision and to say, was that in the best interest of our children? Because I don't want to see you make the same mistake again. And, you know, some people say, well, you know, this might save some money. And usually it's because, you know, we have this factory model sense of economics, economies of scale. But actually, when you think of it, if kids were widgets, that would make sense. But it turns out that kids have emotions and have feelings, and they perform better in smaller communities where they're better known. So I hope you'll take that into account. We would suggest instead, if you want to close schools, that instead you consider redrawing boundaries so that every child in Santa Fe has the opportunity to attend a small school. Thank you.
Thank you.
President Noble, members of the board, and Superintendent Garcia, that concludes public comment.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who brought us your perspective tonight. We appreciate it. And to everyone else who just wants to listen, thank you for being here and engaging. We are moving on. We've moved the union update to below the consent agenda. So we are now on board discussion and possible action. And as it says on the agenda, and many maybe have noted, we have 3 items. What we chose to do here is that all of the board members who wanted to put this on the agenda were able to put their own language on it. So rather than us trying to negotiate different perspectives, we are going to be discussing items A, B, and C, sort of all in conjunction. Item A is from Board Member Cashman, item B is from me, and item C is from Board Member Carrillo. So I don't think I need to read all of those titles, but we'll just go ahead and open it up for board discussion. Board Member Cashman.
I appreciate everyone coming out and speaking about small schools, but I think also, if we're very honest, many of our children cannot attend small schools, and we are not funded for small schools. So I've prepared some remarks. I know you love your schools. Everybody loves their schools, and I could tell you on the south side, many of those students and parents love their schools. But I am addressing this, and I know people have talked to me, I am addressing this and looking at equity in our schools. Okay? Whatever the board decides will not happen overnight. It will take a few years to move to any decision. So for people that think my school would close at the beginning of next year, that's not going to happen. The board has procedures it has to follow before we close schools. Since this is a new item for some of you in the community, I'm just going to go back through some historical information so we're all talking maybe on the same page. And I would also suggest, since we first of all do not have a full board tonight, but also that board members will need to weigh any type of decision, that no action is taken tonight and we take action like we normally do with a normal action item at the November 6th meeting. Okay, so tonight you're going to hear a lot of different views. But I want to talk first about how we got here. In 2017, the board was facing a financial constraint, and we discussed closures. It was decided that the community needed more time to process the discussions, and one member needed more information. So in 2017, the board tabled any action. In 2018, the issue was revisited after board members received every piece of additional information they needed from this superintendent. Superintendent did everything that the board asked. The board was given every piece of information they needed. The board decided that we still couldn't make a new informed decision because we were going to have a new governor, and we were also waiting for the findings of the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit. We have since had a new governor, and we have since had findings of Yazzie Martinez. Unfortunately, the money did not rain down on us. we are back to 2008 funding levels. That is inadequate to provide the education that we know every one of our children in Santa Fe deserve. We are back and forth with the legislature saying, you haven't met the terms of what Judge Singleton outlined. But at that time, the board said, let's wait, let's see, and we'll revisit this right-sizing issue or whatever we're going to do in a year from now. Well, now we're in a year from now. At that time, when we discussed this, I said to the board, and I still firmly believe, but the board chose to take no action, and I said, if we are not going to close schools, take it off the table. Stop putting the community through this emotional turmoil. The board decided not to do that, so here we are again. Right now, this board is eminently qualified to make a decision. We have studied this issue to death. All board members tonight have sat through 2 rounds of closures. It breaks our hearts. It's not something we want to do. But the reality is that it probably needs to happen. But either the board members have sat on this, and except for President Noble, every one of these board members, we have also sat in some sort of capacity on the Citizen Review Committee that goes ahead and understands what shape all of our facilities are in the district. So we are eminently qualified. I don't think it's right to put a new board in a decision that they have to become up to speed on it. The board will either, there may be one new board member, my position, or there may be 2 new board members. We don't know until after the election. But I believe this is the right time for the board to make it. Some of us have also been in this community a long time, and we've sat through the other closures. We may not have been on the board, but we know how it tore the community apart. And I know we can say 3 of those schools got consolidated. However, and we've heard former board members say, don't make the same mistake that we made. However, we fail to forget that there was also another school in the mix that was taken off the table. And that's wrong. I agree that some people, I agree with Mr. Nathan, that said those kids were low income, free and reduced lunch, and they didn't have much of a voice. We know we have a lot of poverty in this district. We know we have a lot of parents that can't afford to even think about interzone transfers. So that's where we are now. What has changed since the board discussed this in 2017? Our enrollment at our elementary schools has continued to decline, and our future projections show that, first of all, parents aren't having kids here in Santa Fe, and the high cost of living prevents many parents from living here. So those are, we pay people to come and to give us analysis and long-range projections of where our community is going to be. We also know we have 3 facilities that are beyond the cost of repair and will have to be completely rebuilt. Those are Nava, EJ, and Chaparral. I don't think our voters will go ahead and vote to build 3 new schools when we already have over 1,000 spaces within our existing elementary schools that could accommodate all of our children in Santa Fe. It's actually more than 1,000, but at the elementary level, there's 1,000. At the K-8s, there's another 1,000. That's the reality. We have too much capacity for the number of kids we have. Last year, the legislature passed House Bill 2, which is phasing out the small size adjustment for the entire state of New Mexico. We lost over $440,000 this current fiscal year. We know that come April, we are going to take even a bigger hit. That's a lot of money for a school district this size to be constantly losing. And by 2024, we will have lost all of the small school size adjustment. Just to be fair to the community, all of those small school adjustments are not made at the elementary level, okay? So I want to, I'm not trying to hide any facts from you. Tezuki, Asikia, and Nava, because they are under 200, receive small school size adjustments. The other small school size adjustments go to Mandela, Engage, and our early college opportunity sites because they are under 400 for middle and high schools. The legislature also made changes to our retirement system for our employees. In the past, many of our teachers retired and then came back to work as retirees. Now, that's not going to probably be economically advantaged to our employees to come back and teach for this district because they will have to give up cost of living adjustments, and they will also end up having to pay into the retirement system but receive no credit for those. They're just paying in, but they're not getting an additional benefit when they finally end up retiring. Currently, we have 6 elementary schools that have only 40 to 71% of their students coming from their zone. 40 to 71% of their students come from the zone. They can't support those without interzone transfers. I heard a parent talk about that process is open to everyone. I would disagree with that. That process is open if you can get your child to the school. We do not provide transportation for those kids. So it's creating an equity issue within this district. And you're right. I know that some people have said, we have a tale of two cities. We do. And for anyone to say, no, come and look at my side of the district. Come look at the south and the west side of the district. There is a tale of two cities. The board also made a decision, we can't build an elementary school under 500 because we are not funded for small schools. Now, there might be, and the biggest thing too is, as people said, our staff is the heart of our schools. I agree with that. Doesn't matter the size of the school, it matters the people that are in that school. We still have employees that come every day to work for us in a high-cost area of living that make less than $15 an hour. That is a shame for us. And we know as a board we want to get there, but we can't get there because we're spreading our resources too thin. So tonight you're going to hear from some of my other board members, and I think everybody knows where I stand on closures. But we're not in an imminent financial crisis, so let's not make a quick decision and slow down and be extremely thoughtful. I find that very offensive as a board member. We have been thoughtful. We have looked at the issues. But maybe if we slow it down, this board never needs to make a decision on a very tough issue that you, the voters, have elected us to manage your schools and oversee your schools. We also will hear and say, and I have to say, if this was a good approach, it wasn't brought to us for over a year. We've sat doing nothing when we knew this issue was going to come back up. That I find irresponsible as a board member. I don't have any creative solutions because I've looked at the solutions. There isn't enough money to go around. We'll also have some people that say, let's work in a collaborative manner with our stakeholders to arrive at creative solutions. Nothing has come to the board for a whole year on any of these creative solutions. Those are nice words, but they're not reality for the board. Some will say the housing market is changing. I see all these new apartments going up. And I live in part of a town and I drive around and I see the apartments going up. The majority of the apartments are studios or one-bedroom apartments. They are luxury apartments. One-bedroom apartments are averaging about $1,300 per month in these new developments that you're seeing across town, with no affordable units. No affordable units. I don't even know how our teachers can afford those apartments. Never mind a family with kids. Now, my husband said to me, you know, Maureen, when I grew up, we lived in a one-bedroom house, and my parents slept in the living room. I slept in the dining room, and my brother slept in the only bedroom. Yeah, it can be done. That's not the way we want our families in our community to have to live. Santa Fe is expensive. Some people will say, let's rezone the district rather than address the underlying issue of declining student population and aging facilities. Redistricting is going to be like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. We are slowly sinking financially and not using our financial resources to benefit all of our kids. I understand that some schools have a lot of resources. Parents are dumping a lot of money into those schools, and I appreciate that. But there are other schools that parents don't have the money nor the time to put into those schools. Finally, and this is probably the one argument that you may hear tonight, and I would agree. Some people say, let's save our historic schools. They're culturally relevant, thank you, relevant to this community. And I agree. So let's look at the facts. If we chose to do that, we could probably only do that with 1 or 2 schools. Our oldest elementary schools are Wood Gormley, which opened in 1926, and Tezuki, which opened in 1938. So if we want to say culturally and historically we need to preserve some of the past, that might be an option for the board. Why do I believe we have to start the closure process, which I'm telling you is going to take years? First of all, the board only has 3 responsibilities. And one of our responsibilities is to maintain the financial health of this district. That is what I'm trying to do. But people have said, Maureen, we want to have the heart. Never mind the finances, we want heart issues. Okay? I understand that. I don't know how many hours of sleep I've lost over this and you've lost over this. And once again, I do believe in the heart. And so I'm going to tell you what some of my heart issues are. Okay? And I'm going to base it on a children's story that not maybe everyone knows, but a lot of you know. And it's by Dr. Seuss, and it was The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. When the Grinch started out, he had a heart that was 2 sizes too small. By the end of the story, that heart had grown into a whole community. And when I talk a whole community, I'm talking Santa Fe. And that heart grew 3 times larger. I'm asking us to show the heart to our whole community. The whole community. I understand that you're protecting what you have, but I want us to think about all of our students, all of our children, all of our staff. So I will always advocate that we give all of our students as small of a classroom as possible, rather than just funding small schools for some. Our kids function, and I think Mr. Nathan said, you know, they function best in a small setting. I agree. We have worked with our union to we do not go to the maximum size unless we absolutely have to in our enrollment in each class. We try to keep those class sizes as small as we can, weighing the financial considerations, because we know our employees are happier if they have small classes. They're better teachers. The kids get a better education. We know that. I want that for every one of our children in this school district, not just for some of ours. I will always advocate that every one of our students start on day one with a permanent full-time teacher. We are stretching our staff too thin. We have kids that are sitting there, and you know, I've taught in our school systems. We have kids sitting there with temporary teachers. Some are great, some, you know, are helping us out in a tough situation. We know that there are not students going into the educational field because of low pay and because of the demands that we're placing on a teacher nowadays. But I want every kid to start the school year with a permanent teacher. Not only do we know that's better for our kids, it's better for our staff. We can't do that. We're stretching that staff so thin by maintaining more resources than we can financially afford to maintain or that we can financially afford to staff. We've lost teachers because other districts that have a little bit of leeway because they've really right-sized can offer bonuses to pull teachers. Breaks my heart when I see a teacher that says, I want to stay in your school district, but somebody else is offering me more money. Can't get there. I believe, just like a lot of you folks said, that the heart and soul of our district is our staff. I don't know how you live in Santa Fe even on a minimum wage of $15 an hour, but we're not paying that to all of our staff. We can't afford it. We have plans on how to get there with the union, but we need money to be able to do that. I want to be able to respect those people that we know working in the educational system is not only a passion, but it's a tough job. And I want to be able to pay our employees at least $15 an hour, which I think is way too little, but at least that's a starting point, and that's where the nation is moving. I'll always advocate that we invest in best practices for all of our students, not for some of our students. And we know that costs money. And we're very fortunate in this community to have people that have a lot of resources and step up to the plate and supplement what we have right now as a budget. We have things like, I don't think there's a board member up here that doesn't feel like we need models like communities in school in all of our schools, not just the 11. But I want to make sure that people understand what they do for us. We as a board provide $400,000 to communities in school. That's not enough to run the program. They go out and they fundraise and work with partners, and they bring $1,250,000 to this school district to run the program. We couldn't replace that. I'm grateful that they've stepped up to the plate and helped us out, but we also need to be helping us as a district, as a community out also. We have one of the things that I think most parents would agree that educationally is great is the field trips our kids go on. We pay very little for field trips because we have another partner, Partners in Education, that raise the money to give those educational and enrichment field trips to our kids. We have programs like AVID, which is the Advancement via Individual Determination, which helps our kids stay in school and become ready for a post-secondary, college, whatever. We need that for all of our kids, not just for some of our kids. It's an expensive program. We can't offer it. We are shortchanging our kids. We're still struggling. Every time we sit up here and we talk about budgets, we're still struggling to provide counselors, social workers, and librarians to our schools, which is not, oh, it's something that we don't need. We need them, but we can't come up with the money to pay for those things. Those professionals, those teachers that every one of your kids love each and every day, they need professional development. We shortchange that And we had to cut back some of that again this year. They need those type of programs. We need to take care of our professionals to keep them here, to say, okay, you can't give us everything, but you value us and you want us to move on. We have not, which I think probably the board would like to someday, move to making all of our kids biliterate, not just some of our kids. We know that you are going to have more economic opportunities if you can speak more than one language. When is language learning the most effective? When you're little. When you don't know any better. It's just, you know, I've lived all over the world, and I see these little kids that go to foreign schools, and, you know, they're on the military base, but they go to foreign schools. They don't even know. They play with their kids in Italian or German, and they're fluent. We don't have those type of resources, and we should, for a community that has a large Hispanic population, a beautiful Hispanic culture. You know, we are missing opportunities, not, you know, my kids went through the public school system. The first exposure they had to Spanish was when they were in high school. Our kids need it when they're in kindergarten, when they're in pre-K, all the way up. And I'll always advocate that we use our taxpayer dollars wisely. The Citizen Review Committee will need board guidance from us sometime in the spring of 2020 about what is the future direction that the board is going to, so they can look at what are the priorities for facilities. We always have more need than dollars, but we're thankful to the taxpayers. They have supported us. But we can't take that support for granted. And I guess the biggest thing I look at is right now, rather than wait until we're back into a financial crisis, which we will be, may not be tomorrow, but it will come again. Why can't we as a board think strategically and know we've got the data, we know our population is not going to be expanding for the very same nature why a lot of people come to Santa Fe. It's a beautiful city. It has a lot of cultural activities, but it is very expensive to live in it. And so young families are probably choosing other places to live within, you know, just a short ride down the road because it can't afford to live here. The other thing, by not making these decisions now, I think that there's probably not anyone in the audience that doesn't agree with me. Pre-K, we know, is essential. Not an option, not a luxury, it's essential to our children. We need to be positioned to be able to offer that. By closing some of our schools, we will be able to be ready when the state funds those programs. We want to jump on that. We cannot put pre-K into our existing structures without making some major renovations, major changes. So, now is the time for the board to move forward and do what is best for all of our kids, not just some of our kids. I'm asking us to think about everyone. Breaks my heart when I listen that a kid comes into, when I was teaching, into my classroom, I don't know where I'm eating anymore. Or I don't know where I'm going to go home to because we're getting evicted from our apartment. There is poverty in this community. For those of us that aren't experiencing it, we have more of a moral obligation to help all of our kids. I really believe that. Let's not keep on, you know, the other thing is right now we have a superintendent that is more than capable of helping us navigate this path of closure if we're courageous enough as a board to go ahead and make that decision. It's a political decision. I'm asking that we don't keep on putting our community through emotional turmoil. I'm asking that, again, what I said a year ago, and this board still wouldn't do it, If you're not going to make the decision to politically, because of political considerations, you will not close the schools. Let's not be out there again, which our previous board did, have community conversations, have stakeholders come, and still tinker around the edges because we really can't talk. Be honest with the community. Say, hell no, I'm not closing schools. That is at least more honest than to be tearing us apart over and over again. But remember, when we do that, we have also said there are some that have and some that don't. And I'm not willing to think that this board is here. We were elected to do a job. Now is the time for all of us to do the job, not postpone the job and say, I need one more study, I need one more piece of information, I need one more thing. Now is the time. This board is eminently qualified. I listened to my two people that are going to replace me. One of them, or two, I guess one only can replace me. I've listened to them speak. Some say, every kid in Santa Fe should have the same education that we have out in El Dorado. It should be equitable throughout the entire district. Please don't make any false illusions that it's equitable right now. It is not. Another one of the candidates says, there are many fine things, but sometimes the board has to say we can't afford everything. Sometimes the board has to be willing to make tough decisions. And, somebody said to me, well, what happens if the community went out and raised money so we can keep all these schools open? First of all, I think we would be constitutionally violating the law, because there is a reason we are funded the way we are funded rather than through property taxes. And it's a good thing for New Mexico. So I'm asking the board that we take up this decision on November 6th, and I'm saying it's time now for this board to do the job. If you don't want to do the job, you shouldn't have been up here on the board. Please do not look at what job you want, down the road. This is a job you have. It's more honest to do the job. I am surprised that anybody would clap. My husband said to me, do you have a flak vest tonight? He knows how difficult this is for me. But I really do. And probably one of the reasons I'm leaving the board, because I don't think we're going to get to where we need to be. And it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart to see us pretending that St. Francis is a dividing line for this community. It breaks, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but times have changed. Times have changed. We need to change, and I believe this board and I believe the community can change. And I also believe that if we use this time now to plan, we can make a transition that is less traumatic to our students and to our staff and our community. We can phase it in. I don't want to wait until we're back into another crisis, and then there's no choice for us.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Carrillo, Vice President Price, comments, thoughts?
Just very well stated. Thank you, Maureen. And I'm sorry you're leaving the board, because I think in my 4 years of knowing you on the board and my many years of knowing you on the CRC, I can say you're one of the few people that actually does a ton of homework, and I just really appreciate that, because I think people sometimes coming to this board and other legislative bodies, maybe particularly the Roundhouse, they don't do the homework, and maybe sometimes that's why we are where we are. But I disagree with some of the things. Question-wise, and this is a concern I have with this evening. It's got to be facts first, okay? Facts. No emotion, because it's a super emotional issue. Facts only. We have no schools over 1,000 except for our high schools. Doesn't matter what was said earlier, we just do not, okay? And that's really important to know. Am I wrong there? It's just our high schools that have over 1,000 students. Okay, so also, our schools on the south and west sides are not busting at the seams, okay? So this was a great article, by the way, the New Mexican, but the numbers can be deceiving. So I want to ask I'm going to have a whole thing later, but this speaks to what you were saying, functional capacity. I think there's a lot of confusion about what that word means, right? That means basically filling every seat in every classroom and every square foot in a school. Is that, Superintendent, the optimal way to operate any school?
Madam President, members of the board, the answer would be no, because you don't know what kind of programming you need. You may have, do you want me to explain it?
No, I just wanted to know because, but it's just important to know that so that when this says, oh my God, there's 200 or 250 seats here, there really aren't, okay? You've got to think about functional capacity. You've got to think about, not about functional capacity, but programmatic needs in a school. So when someone, for instance, looks at EJ and says, oh my God, we can all fill all of these seats, we don't want to have 200, or I don't know the chart here for EJ, whatever it said in the paper, we don't want to have 374 kids at EJ. Would you say that's safe, Principal Baca? Yeah. So you want to be able to function in a small school environment, as Mr. Nathan was saying, knowing your kids, right? And so it's very important that we consider all of that when we're thinking about numbers of kids. Another statement that was made, I believe that was just completely factually incorrect. It has to do with the schools on the south side and the busing at the seams. When we look at, first off, we built Nina and El Camino because we wanted K-8s over there. That was a decision of the 2011-2012 board, right? But when we look at those schools and it says, oh my God, there are 720 kids. Yeah, for K-8. But if you separate out K-6, maybe it's only 460 or 470 kids. The other grades are 7 and 8. So if we're looking at small school size relative to K-6, it's not it's not large. Yeah, it's larger than some of our other schools, but no, it's larger than the small school size resolution that I introduced in 2012 that we all passed unanimously, but it's not like this incredibly behemoth of a school. So we just have to think about things in that way. Facts. I have a thing to do. We are losing our small school size adjustment. That's going to hit us hard, and I'll speak to that later. I disagree that we're going to be sinking financially. I'm cautiously optimistic that even if oil and gas takes a hit, that somehow, at least in the next 7 years, we'll find our way to doing the right thing. That's all I have based. There's a lot of notes here, but I appreciate. I'm going to miss you. I mean, if I remain on the board, I'll certainly miss you because you're always articulate. You always do your homework, and I know how committed you are to kids and teachers.
Okay. Is that all, Board Member Carrillo?
Yeah, I know that.
Can you use your mic?
I mean, I know that you're the next person on the agenda relative to board discussions, so I want to save everything until it's my turn.
You're welcome to take your turn now. Vice President Price has said she will pass until the next meeting. She is, of course, welcome to change her
All right.
mind.
Well, I'd rather just hear from you first and then go, if that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's fine. So, when I first got on the board, it was March of 2017, and we very quickly started talking about closing schools, namely EJ and Nava. And I sat there as a brand new board member. It's not a great thing to do to new board members, I would say. And I just tried to listen. And what didn't sit well with me was that we were talking about money and buildings and not about kids and families. And I come to education and to the board after a lot of work in economics. I was a business and Wall Street reporter for 10 years, and then I spent about 10 years in economic development for the city of Santa Fe. And I don't know if I've stolen Mr. Nathan's talking points or if he's stolen mine, but completely agree with the background in business and economics that we cannot consider schools as a manufacturing system, that kids are not widgets, that teachers are not factory workers, and to quote another speaker tonight, that culture is that magic something. And I think we should always look at facts, and I appreciate Board Member Carrillo, you correcting some of the misstated facts, because in a conversation like this there are many. But I wouldn't say we need to have only facts. I think it is a heart conversation, and I think it's because we're talking about kids with hearts, parents and families, and teachers and staff with hearts, and that culture is that magic something that cannot be very easily rebuilt. There were a lot of profound points made tonight in our public forum. I hope everybody was listening. I am committed to listening as deeply and profoundly, even when I fundamentally disagree with the premise, because I want to learn and I want to understand. And I've also been contacted by a number of people, including former board members. And those are some really interesting perspectives, including a board member who said, don't put the community through this again. If, you know, this is, if the decisions, well, and I guess here's the fundamental thing. I just don't believe that we can jump to a presupposed conclusion. I guess I just don't accept the premise that because the solution to financial issues has always been closing schools, that it has to be closing schools, because fundamentally, we are at a place in education and in our state that is very, very different. And I think that we have to embrace that, embrace the different opportunity that we have now. Fundamentally, schools are still on an agricultural system. We are still thinking about working in the fields in the summers. Our economy has changed, working families have changed, and we need to understand and really meet families and kids where they are now, not where they were, and with the presuppositions of the previous long-held systems, because it's always been that way. I mean, for me personally, that's a really good way to turn me off. It's always been that way, so we should do it the same way, or presuppose that the same conclusion is there. And I would say that, you know, a lot has changed since 2017, when I first sat in the boardroom and was asked to consider closing schools. And I would say that, you know, I won't do that again. I won't talk about facilities and money and not about how we are evolving the education system and how we are fundamentally changing things to better meet our kids, our families, and our teachers. I also, I guess I have to say, I reject the thinking of scarcity that, you know, because we have a teacher shortage, that if we simply downsize, that we won't have a teacher shortage. We have a teacher shortage because of decades of treating teachers like factory workers and not allowing teachers to be the amazing educated professionals that they are, who hold our kids, you know, all day, every day, in really, frankly, challenging ways that many of us don't have the strength to do. And I hope that we can bring back creativity and superhero level respect and adoration for our teachers, and that we can get salaries that are commensurate with the value that teachers bring to our society. And, you know, that, I mean, I say, can we pay teachers like way more than lawyers? That could be a goal. And I really don't think that at this stage anything should be considered impossible, because the other things that have changed since 2017, we have a new governor. We have a bunch of revenue. It won't last forever. We have a willingness at the Legislative Finance Committee and in the legislature to push for extended school year. That's what they're doing. That's what they're funding. To push for K-5+, to move towards year-round models which would serve working parents and families better. Speaking as one, frankly, it's always the who's picking up the kid at 3. We need communities of support. We need after-school programs. And I believe that if we ask families, if we ask parents and kids what they need and want, that we have an opportunity. And we're not in a crisis, even though isn't there that Chinese character that is crisis and opportunity. But I think we have a unique opportunity now because of the will of the legislature, because of the new administration in the Roundhouse, and critically, because of the Yazzie Martinez lawsuit that mandates that we do things differently. And I think we can take all of that. We also have a superintendent who knows an awful lot, and when, you know, you push her a little bit, she kind of rolls out with all these models that she knows and says, well, there's this, there's that, there's magnet, there's, you know, we once talked about being a charter district, we did. And with this leader as the head administrator in our district, I think we have a lot of the pieces in place to do something profound, which has been done in other places, and we can look at those, which is to evolve our education system, our community school system, to be different and better, to be more of a year-round model, to offer more choices. In large schools, there can be more athletics, there can be more electives. Some of us, well, okay, I was a theater person. You kind of need a critical mass of people to get a really robust theater program going, and I loved that. So some people might want those things. A lot of people we know, a lot of our kids are in school for the athletics, and the academics in a way are a means to doing the athletics, and I think we need big schools. I happen to represent, and I really don't love the idea that, you know, the district and we have to be all these different sides. I represent both Tesuque, which I believe is our smallest enrolled school, and El Camino, which aside from the high schools, I believe is our largest. So the long northern district that I represent, from Tesuque to Carlos Gilbert to Gonzales and Aspen, we don't really know about Mandela sometimes, but that is in my district, and out to El Camino, you know, is really diverse and really sort of across the board. So I hope many of you and many of the community members have read what I wrote. I think we need to be very conscious about a community conversation, a community engagement process. I think it needs to be different, and we need to learn the lessons of what happened before. And we need to go to where people are. We need to target some of the communities whose voices are heard less than others. We need to make a distinct effort. So it's not just having a meeting here, and it's not just having a meeting at the Southside Library. It is going into a community where there is trust through trusted advisors to talk to teen parents, to talk to immigrant families, to talk to, in particular, the people who are less likely to show up, frankly, and speak in our microphone with us sitting up here on a dais. We have to go to where people are and listen and really make an effort to hear all of the voices. I think we have to gather data. I think we have to do a pretty extensive survey. I think we have to engage our community partners, and we have to ask the city in particular to work with us. Coincidentally, I had a breakfast this morning about the College of Santa Fe property. and what's going on there. And there are plans for housing. And we heard somebody say that the neighborhood around Nava is turning over, and it will. Demographically, that's what happens. And we need to look at that. And we may not be having more babies, but we can think about attracting people back from private school. And I know this board has done that before, and I know we've done a lot of work. And I think we need to ask, because, you know, I even spent some time with somebody who was going to meet with the governor, and they said, you know, I just want to go tell the governor, don't close, it was an EJ parent, don't close my school. And so this issue is permeating to the governor's office and certainly to our city council. And I think we have to ask, and we have to think about busing and providing busing, because that is one of the barriers and one of the factors. You know, maybe a transfer is available to everybody. Well, a transfer is available to everybody who can deal with the transportation across town, and that's time and expense and the flexibility to do it. So, but we have a lot of buses, and the city has a lot of buses, and I think we could actually figure out how to move students around this city. It's not that big, to get to a better solution, to bring down, I don't know if we can eliminate it, but gosh, that should be a goal, bring down the barrier of transportation to families. And neighborhood schools should be an option. We are in our neighborhood school. We love our neighborhood school. It's partly because I can't get anywhere with that much extra time, and honestly, you know, driving across town is not something that my family could handle. Not to mention, we really like our neighborhood school, and walking home and riding bikes is a lot of fun. So, you know, my hope, and I think we have to do this well, and I would hope that we can, as a board, look at the lessons, because a lot of this has gone before, and I think we can, I think we have to do better. And it's not easy. And I think to presuppose any conclusion is wrong. I think, you know, I would be in favor of putting a moratorium on the closing schools conversation until we get to a plan for our 2021 bond. We have time now. We have time to think about this, and to some extent, that 2021 bond can be the force that makes us think about where we're going to invest that money in our kids, in our families, in them doing better. And that is capital money. That is for facilities. I read Heather's long 20-plus page analysis, and, you know, there's some really interesting issues, and what she raises is, you know, decisions that I cannot speak to, having not been on the CRC and having not been there for all of the history. But, you know, frankly, the decision to invest all that money in Atalaya has never felt right to me. It doesn't make sense when you look at the movements and the demographics. But if we change the model, if we think about it with neighborhood schools as an option, with choice as an option, so that maybe we have science magnets and music magnets and art magnets and early childhood centers and lab schools, and we partner with the city to figure out who's going where and get bus routes working. And we look for wraparound services, after school programs, health clinics, and we think about this in a more holistic way as community well-being, and we reject the scarcity mentality that simply says this is a linear equation where there are a certain number of dollars and a certain number of seats and a certain number of, because our functional capacity is different in a lecture hall than if that same room is a lab. And I think, you know, Dr. Garcia sort of made that clear, but just to really drill it down to use of space. If we were going to put lab tables in here, there would be a lot fewer seats. So thinking about our programmatic needs first and not our functional capacity. And I really think in this town, thank goodness we have a lot of values in common, and I think most of us really value greater equity, really want to fight the systemic issue that is poverty, really want to make it better. I mean, do more good for more people, which is always what I come back to as an elected official. And this is not, I don't think we know how it can be yet, because it was done in the past in a budget-constrained environment. We haven't really pushed it out. I spent all weekend reading about how districts transform and what they've done and going to year-round school models. And there's a lot out there, and there's a lot more than there was 2 years ago, because a lot of districts have tried. We were forwarded, all of us on the board, we were forwarded an article about Cincinnati that really rethought their district and actually reversed some declining enrollment, brought students back, and made all of their schools into community schools that have support. I think we need to ask our philanthropic partners to help us fund some of this, because, you know, if the community wanted to raise money for schools, Board Member Cashman is right. There's a penalty that if, like, the city were to give us $1 million, we'd have to give back, I think, 3/4 of it because of the school funding formula, which is an equitable thing for the state of New Mexico. But they could fund communities in schools and support programs, and we could have that $400,000 to put into other budgets. There's lots of ways to think about this. If we think about early childhood and really getting good at that, I would also agree, and, you know, Board Member Cashman made a lot of good points, that we need to think about scaling up. I think it's been a great idea from the NEA. Let's start an early childhood center as a benefit for staff in the Santa Fe Public Schools. Let's embrace that. Let's try and really take care of our people, perhaps even starting with our teachers and educators as the core of the community that also needs support, because without teachers, we don't have schools, we don't have culture, we don't have community. So, ultimately, here's what I want to do, and I'm happy to not take action tonight. I do think that we should have a full board, although I also think we can't wait forever. But what I would like to do is for us to think about a process and how we set this up for success, and how we do this well, and how we hear from people whom we don't usually hear from, and how we truly embed this process in the community, and not just in the community that is directly connected to our schools, but in the city, in the business community, in our nonprofits who can come around us as the Santa Fe Public Schools to support us, because this community believes in public education. Even some of my very good friends, whom I kind of have taken to regularly shaming for sending their kids to private school, even those people really believe in public school, and they will show up, and they will engage, and they will spend money. It remains to be seen whether they will bring their kids back, but I think that is a goal, and I think that it is achievable. Anyway, so here's what I want to do. I think we need to think about a process to set this up for success. I have spent a bunch of time thinking about this. It's not perfect, and I'm not necessarily married to what I'm about to outline, but I think that we should designate a task force that has representatives nominated by each board member. I think there should be some at-large board members as well. Maybe we give those, designate those to the superintendent. We could also try a community nomination process, but that could get weird. And then we should have that task force oversee professional work. We should put money behind a contract for not just facilitation, but real research into national models that will be relevant, real stakeholder engagement that goes to where people are, and, you know, we make sure and hold them accountable to get there. I think we should also, and we should have the task force oversee this professional team that does work of stakeholder engagement, looking at national models, gathering data, and looking at demographic trends, all of the things. We have a lot of that in hand already. And that we should do a pretty extensive survey of our community to understand where folks are, and we should put some money behind this, and we should ask our philanthropic partners to help, because there are a lot of good philanthropies working in New Mexico, and I think we don't have to shoulder the whole burden of a cost for something like this. But that ultimately this, let's say, professional team would check in and be overseen by a community task force for a period of time, and we can think about what that is, and that the board should do some work to set the values that will frame the work ahead of time, and that the board ultimately should approve the scope of work that is then put out to bid or proposal, or I really like the city has done this new thing for the college campus, which is an RFEI, request for an expression of interest, because we might not want the lowest bid or even the highest bid. We certainly want to weigh it, and I think we want to weigh it for things like community engagement, nonprofit partnership. I think we should ask that there be as deep and broad community partnerships in the group that gets paid to do this work, and that we really figure out ultimately how to root this and do a rigorous and well-vetted process over a period of time that sets us up for a new bond. And if this community wants to up the amount of bond money that we put into our kids and schools, great. If we find that there's not a lot of will, and I think we have to ask the people that are engaged in this room or at home, or just in reading the paper or emailing your board members, we have to ask everybody to get out there and to demand of community members that you show up, that you pay attention, that we do better with the community engagement process in order to bring the full support that this school system needs to evolve, because it's time for us to transform this system. And we can take this opportunity, we can take all of the fortunate factors that are lined up right now, and I believe we have a chance. The chance for real success in something like this is always way smaller than the chance for failure. But I believe we have the recipe in place that we can do something really amazing, and it's going to take all of us. And my ask of this community is not small, that you show up, that you talk to people, that you don't just come and say, no, I don't like that, that you bring iterative improvements if you're going to bring criticism, and that you talk to friends and neighbors and, you know, the elders next door and make them care if they don't already. So that's what I would propose, some sort of variation on ultimately a community task force overseeing a professional team to do this work with parameters that we work on and are set by the board, and that we give it some time and ability to really bloom, because I think we are at a crossroads, and I think we have an opportunity to actually choose abundance and really choose a transformed, future Santa Fe public school system that is way better, and we can get out of this kind of get small cycle of scarcity that we've found ourselves on. So I really hope that we choose hope and abundance. So that's where I stand. Board Member Cashman.
And just a technical point, and I know you haven't sat on CRC. I've sat on it for all my time as a board member, plus 15 years before that. We are going to get ready for the bond. It will be, and Ms. Wagner could correct me, or Gabe, Mr. Romero could correct me. We'll start working on that in spring of 2020. It's a long process. So you're saying all of this, which sounds to me like, oh, probably a year, we're going to be already into the bond. We have to make decisions. There are things that the CRC has to do, and we're going to be moving out on that. So I just want to it's not, when we get to it, CRC, because of what we have to do, will start in late spring, getting ready for the 2021 bond. And, you know, I love your hope, but I'm also, I tend to be, and I know we would probably look at the glass, is it half full or half empty? I am afraid that if we continue down this path of not making a decision, this community will lose faith and our bond will fail. And we have seen that happen in other communities. We cannot afford to have a bond fail. And to say that we're going to put out more facilities than what we need, we know we have needs right now at our two major high schools, our other middle school or T's needs, and we probably have one elementary school that has to be rebuilt. That can't even go in one bond. And so, you know, I guess what I'm saying is this board, and I think some people have alluded to it, there is not equity in this district. And the longer we postpone addressing it, the worse it's getting for our kids. And I believe in every one of our kids have the capacity to learn, to excel, and to have bright futures. But it needs the will behind the board instead of empty words. So, but the bond for sure is going to be, we will start in spring of, or the members of CRC will start in late 2020, spring of 2020, working on that bond.
Any further comment?
President Price had anything before I ask her or anything? Okay. I embrace your hope and enthusiasm because I don't see the glass half empty. I see it as, I mean, I really believe that in the next 4 and 6 years especially, but that there'll be the turn that we need in the legislature that really starts to understand that our public schools are the foundation of any economic development we hope to have in New Mexico. Well, and in Santa Fe, right? And so we have time to put our money where our mouth is and kind of really decide, like, who do we want to be as a city and as a state? Are we happy being number 50 and everything? And it's totally cool if everyone says, hey, yeah, we're happy being 50. That's cool. But okay, then let's quit having these discussions. Let's just, you know, accept where we are and move on. And I don't believe that we're all happy with that. I believe that we take a lot of greater pride. But so I mean, there are a lot of things you said that really resonated. The year-round school thing, Linda Trujillo brought that up a number of times, that we are still based on an agrarian calendar. And based on that, I would say we need to start school after Labor Day. Been saying that for 8 years. It's never caught on. But, you know, if you're going to start in summer, don't start in the second week of August, for God's sakes. It's too hot. But you're right. I mean, on these things. I'm looking at my notes because a lot of it's going to fold into, if you will, I don't want to say speech, but my thoughts around this. Now, the thing that I would be most critical of, and I would agree with Ms. Cashman, is we're elected officials. We were put here to make decisions. If we don't want to make them, don't run and get off the board. I think that not deciding is deciding. I don't necessarily agree with you wholeheartedly around putting things off in 2017 and 18 were wholly political. I mean, I remember marching with all of the EJ parents, you know, in I think that was 18, spring of 18. It all becomes a blur sometimes. And, you know, saying that, no, we don't need to do this now, okay? And I don't think we need to plan right now on the idea that we're going to have hardship ahead. Regardless of what happens with oil and gas, we do have, depending on who you're talking to, anywhere between $17 and $19 billion in our permanent fund. And there really is only one person or two people that have been holding up access to that, literally. And using the word literally correctly, 1 or 2 people that have been holding that up. And they know who they are. And so it never gets to the floor, and then nobody has to make a decision, right, if it doesn't get to the floor. So can I hear my thoughts on all of this? You know, if we had a full board, I was thinking of doing this. Very disappointed that we don't have Secretary Garcia here tonight. So what I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Cashman, I heard you say, for God's sakes, take it off the table already. Something like that.
You know, I've said it for each time we've talked about it. If we are
Okay.
not going to close schools, take it off the table.
Okay.
Have the will to take it off the table.
Okay.
I think that's the wrong decision,
Okay.
but take it off the table. At least then the community knows, and then
Okay.
you figure out when will you deal with the budget, and we've sat here many times. It's either this or this, when we know we
understand.
both need both.
Okay. You also said sometimes these decisions require courage. Okay. So what I would say then is to make the courageous decision to take it off the table. I would have those kind of follow on one another. This is not, I do not believe this is a challenge of having to, it's not a facilities challenge. I think it's a filling the seats challenge. And the filling the seats challenge is not around facilities, building, moving, closing, especially not building. Right now, I believe the only building we're going to be doing and should be doing is the $10 million set aside for ECO that we set aside in the last bond cycle, and that, or in the beginning of this, what year is it, 2019, in the 17 bond cycle, right? The set aside of $10 million there. Decision of that coming obviously from the 13 bond cycle on CRC and the fact that we want ECO just to begin with, right? So other than that, I would say no new building. I know that Mandela may need work, especially if it stays at the Lerigorte site. And we do know, and I agree with you, Ms. Cashman, we were on CRC together, that of EJ, Nava, and Chaparral, one of them probably needs to be rebuilt ground up. From my experience on CRC, the one that makes the most sense is Chaparral being rebuilt from ground up. Now, this doesn't mean that you do anything with Nava or Sequia or even Tsuke, because somehow Tsuke with only 90 kids never is part of the conversation that we're having around, híjole, the schools are too small, resources, and they're having combo grades and all of this. But if we're going to look at the whole district, we have to look at the whole district, right? If we're going to look at equity, we have to look at equity in all of our schools. So I believe this is a challenge that is not facilities. This is a challenge, and I believe that you would agree with this because you've said this as I've known you at least 24 times. And it's all on video. We record everything. Transportation is one of the very biggest issues facing any realignment of the district in zoning, right? Now, would you agree with that? Yes. Okay, so if you, put that over here, like if there was a whiteboard, I'd be putting transportation up there, okay? The other thing is transportation, and I would say distribution. Like if we're looking at a private sector, like what are we going to do with all of our, not saying anyone's a product or a widget or anything else, but the idea, okay, now that we want to address this transportation problem, it's like how are we going to distribute our kids? What makes the most sense to achieve equity, which I believe we all agree on as being one of the foundational things we need to be looking at as a district, right? Equity, where we want to move our kids, and that's the rezoning. So the thing that I would really want to look at is, one, taking closure off the table, and two, once that is off the table, nowhere on their whiteboard do we use the C word. Asakia does, nobody's got to sweat it. Every 3 years, the people at EJ are saying, seriously, again? Because then what happens is enrollment drops because everyone's got a lot of anxiety, right? So just for God's sakes, man, take it off the table. Have the courage to do so. Nava, and I know principal, even though he's a Bears fan, I think the world of Mark Ducharme and the success that he's had at Nava. We heard Maya speak this evening and the two kids, and so what's happening over there is working, okay? What's happening at EJ is working, because I believe with Georgia there, we're going to have the stability we need in principalship, right? Because if you keep having principals that turn, you don't have the success in program or anything that you need, and you don't have parents actually choosing that school. And we've had the same problem at EJ that we had at Santa Fe High for years. Basically a new principal every year. So what kind of confidence does that give people in the district, right? And then we look at Asakia, and I think we heard about first off, did you know, this is totally an aside, I hope I lose my point, the toque that all the little kids were wearing, what the folds mean, every fold in a toque? Does anybody out there know? I had to learn this because my ex is a chef. It's a way to prepare eggs. Though all those are different preparations for eggs. So that aside, what they did tonight, and I've said this every time I'm at a Sakia, whether I'm talking there or talking to others, why aren't we learning from this school? They spend so much time on art and music, and they still manage to be in a school and create a culture of love, right? Why aren't we learning from that? Why aren't we taking that model and in an elementary where maybe there's 450 kids or in a K-8 where there's maybe 460 or 70, why aren't we breaking that down, right, into two, if you will, families that can have that same experience? It's possible. There just has to be the will to do so, all right? And when I walk into a Sakia and I walk into Wood Gormley or in the schools that I represent, when I serve Thanksgiving dinner, which by the way, we haven't gotten the schedule yet. When I serve Thanksgiving meals at EJ, which I've done every year, except last year because we didn't get the schedule, there's joy, okay? There's joy, there's love with the parents and the kids and the teachers. And we can replicate that where all of our kids are known, even in schools that may be larger. So what I would propose to the district is that we really look at, Denver did this. So I remember Ms. Noble, you said we could figure out how to move people around. Ihole were so much smaller than Denver, and they've managed to do this with like a hub system. And so kids could go to schools of choice and have the transportation to work to do so. But that's never going to happen unless you like have a decision tree and you first make some decisions and then take them off the table and then say, okay, these are the other decisions now that we have to make. All right? So the first thing that I would propose, and I was going to propose this for this evening, and I still might, is to have the courage to once and for all take closure off the table, okay, for these schools. Now, and then I would embrace parts of what you're saying, Ms. Noble, and because I agree completely with Ms. Cashman. If we don't make a decision, then abandon your seat, get off the board, and find someone who will. I mean, I believe that this really only needs 2 study sessions and 2 public forums, okay? 2 study sessions, 2 public forums, and then we can make the decision as the elected body. Ben Ray does it every time he's making an important decision. Come to Santa Fe and have a couple of forums and see which way the wind blows. Tom Udall never did that. I don't believe that's an effective way to govern, and we are a governing body of the Santa Fe Public Schools, okay? And if we are able to make that courageous decision, right, to take closure off the table, I think not only will we restore confidence in the board, we'll be able then to move on to what's next. And what's next is figuring out the transportation and distribution challenge, okay? So right now, when you look at some of the ways that the lines are drawn, and I know that the Wood Gormley people are just gonna go ballistic when I say this because, I believe it was in 2009 or 10 when they were thinking of changing the part of the boundary for Wood Gormley. I mean, people got really irate because they bought homes in this area, they wanted to only go there. And when people say they only want to go to this school or that school, it makes me crazy. Because I believe that all of our schools is just as good as one another, and a lot of it really depends on parenting, right? It depends on whether or not you're reading to your kid, whether or not you're part of the SAC at the school, and whether or not you are trying to even form a parent-teacher committee, right? We're missing a board member. Okay, I know, it's been a lot of, that's right. So, missing 2 actually. So I believe that once you make that one decision, all of the other decisions, and that's a very bold thing for us to do, all of the other decisions emanate from that, right? So then we get serious about rezoning. So then we say, okay, we want to fill, not to functional capacity, right? To programmatic relativity, if you will. We want to fill these empty seats at EJ and Carlos Gilbert and Salazar and all of these different schools and Nava. We don't want Nava to be its capacity of, which is just ridiculous. Mark, you'll probably concur. What did we say Nava's functional capacity was? Do you remember, Mark? It's down here. Oh, it's under X Xavier. That's why I didn't see it. But I'm sure it is a number that it far exceeds. Here it is. Functional capacity 287. Let's use every nook and cranny of your school, right? That's a good way to utilize the property. But all these other decisions. So now we look at, okay, how do we fill the seats, maintaining kind of a programmatic integrity? But now we have to make that decision, so now we'll do so. I believe that we have both the transportation staff and the facility staff, and with the superintendent, we have the ability to do that, okay? But first, got to take something off the whiteboard, right? If we're not willing to take something off the whiteboard, then we shouldn't be sitting up here. And then, and I agree with you, I don't think we're kicking the can. I think we have a very thoughtful board. I'm sorry Mr. Garcia is not here tonight, but even preceding Mr. Garcia, with Linda, with Glenn, with Frank and Barbara, I think there have been a number of people everyone on this board. We're not here because we just don't have anything to do one night a week or two nights, you know what I mean? We really care about our kids. And that's the other thing, a decision that is based solely on what's best for kids and families, right? When Aspen was being built or considered, I remember, because I knew somebody who was involved in the construction company, that because that's when basically our construction itinerary, if you will, was the tail wagging the dog, right? So that's why, and I remember this happening, that's why Alvord, Connie, and Latagorte, the community had a lot of outcry around closing those schools. Absolutely. But we made the other decision anyway, because that train was already rolling. They already planned on what they needed to do with Aspen. That was a done deal, all right? And this board has never operated that way, ever. And anyone that says we're not transparent is just not paying attention, all right? So so here, what we need to do is take the thing off the whiteboard, and then, I'm sorry, I lost a train of thought for a moment. And then focus on the other two things that we need to do. And I know that we can do this. I'm completely opposed to anything this can also be done by the end of January, all right? The 2 study sessions, the 2 forums. They don't need to go into next year. And this will also mean that the CRC, because they won't be meeting until maybe March or April on this issue, right? Will then have plenty of time to structure the bond. Now to the bond. Consider this for a moment. If we're not having to think about building all of these schools, we have all of this money to maintain our schools maybe more thoroughly than we've been able to in the past couple of years. Because as there have been decreases in SB 9 and SB 33, HB 33, we've had to share more of it. We've had less money for ourselves. Now, we still do an excellent job of this. I think that Mr. Romero, Ms. Yonda Wagner, everybody involved in facilities management does a stellar job. But when you look at the facilities master plan list and what our schools need in terms of maintenance, there was 220 million in needs last bond cycle, okay? But if we're not having to use money to build buildings, maybe except for one, then we have more money to be able to sustain buildings. All right? Now, to the issue of building. There's the idea, the notion that's been, not a notion. We know that when we get to the point where if a building needs, the expenses are 65% or more of what the building needs in terms of remodel or refunctioning or whatever else, that it makes more sense. And as I understand it, DFA and the PSFA start to take a harder look at, well, why are you doing this, right? But I would ask you to look at it as you would look at your home.
Will you just unpack what those acronyms mean?
Oh, I'm sorry. DFA is Department of Finance Authority, Administration. PSFA, Public School Finance Authority.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Yeah, too many acronyms in schools. And, but I want you to think about when you're owning your home, right? It's like, or when you're buying a home, it's like, oh my God, it needs all this work. But you're not doing all this work at one time. Okay, you're spreading out this work. Maybe you want to do the windows first because it saves energy. Maybe then you want to work on that foundation problem you have. Then you want to add the 3rd bedroom. Then you want to do the roof. So we're not thinking about it all at once. You're spreading out these expenses, okay, being more responsible with your tax dollars. And that's what I would say, taking these 3 off the whiteboard and having bond money available to do that work allows for. Now, if somebody points to the decision we made in the past, and the one we always point to the most is Agua Fria, and that was $10 million, good money after bad money, year after year. What made that good money after bad money more than anything was that the kids, like if a piece of paper, if this is the Agua Fria district, the school was right here at the tippy corner of the paper, and all of the kids were at the very, very other end. It made no sense in those years between like 2004 and 2010 to put that kind of money into that property when there actually weren't kids zoned for that school anywhere near the school, all right? And there's a reason that courage, that it was Glenn, Linda, me, Frank, and Barbara had the courage to say, you know something? We just cannot go down this road any further. Not one dime's worth. We cannot try to fit a K-8 on that little itty-bitty property. We just have to stop. And once we made that decision, you know, we looked at a couple of properties, neither of which worked, and then we found the property where you now see El Camino. And now it's this amazing school, right? And it's not too large when you factor out K-6 versus 7-8, okay? And I know that some of these ideas are being, like they're overlapping. So then also, if you're doing your rezoning, and let's say you're saying, somebody mentioned biliterate schools, right? More bilingual schools or dual language. You're easing the population on some of these schools that are maybe experiencing some distress in some areas. And then maybe what this means is, hey, look, you know, we can expand dual language to 3 more schools because we have the need, because all of these kids want to come towards St. Michael's, right, in all the schools that are there. So that's going to be another end product, if you will, of the rezoning. So I'm going to look at my notes and make sure that I didn't miss anything, because Denver's done the transportation thing. Task force survey, absolutely not. And it's not because I'm not Democratic, it's precisely because I'm Democratic, and you have 5 elected officials here that you elected, and you did that to us to make decisions. I love the idea of not coming from scarcity. I agree with you completely, Ms. Noble, this idea that we have to plan that every day is going to be the rainy day. And then, Ms. Cashman, when you said, you made the comment about, and I have this in like caps with exclamation marks, let's slow down, let's be more judicious, let's have more task forces. It's like, no, because we've been slowing down since 2017 for you, since 2011 for me. I disagree. Atalaya, I believe, was a great decision. It's a school that's full. We rebuilt it as a commuter school. It's a commuter school, and it's full. And all those schools came in on time and under budget that same year. I don't want this to come around again. I don't want this to come around again, whether or not I'm on the board, whether Ms. Gonzalez is on the board. Nobody should have to face this again, okay? Because it's coming up like every 2-3 years. The way to not face it again is to take these things off the whiteboard and then let all of the decisions emanate from there. So with that, and I'm open for discussion, I am going to propose a motion, because this is board discussion and action, to make a decision tonight that we are not closing, or even having closing as part of the discussion, X Francis Nava Elementary School, E.J. Martinez School, or Sequia Madre School. That is my motion for right now. And I would entertain a second for the purposes of discussion.
I'll second it for the purpose of discussion, and now I'll begin discussing. Okay. I want everybody that's sitting there and clapping, and you think transportation is easy for our kids. My children attended Santa Fe Public Schools. We live 10 minutes from Pinon Elementary. Every day since kindergarten, my kids rode the bus. Because of the boundaries, my kids got on the bus for a school that started at 7:30 in the morning. They got on the bus at 6:15 in the morning to get 10 minutes away. Okay, not everybody lives close. And when school let out at 3 o'clock, I picked up my little 5 years old kids at 4:30 in the afternoon. That's a long day for any kid. So you're telling me that because the only way, you know, we have ways to, and I know that this will not fly, but I'm going to throw it out here so we have some reality in the conversation. Instead of busing kids to Wood Gormley, we could certainly bus them to El Dorado. So that's a way to rezone. To put our kids on the south and west side and say, we're going to bus you to a neighborhood school, that's not their neighborhood. And it doesn't matter that it's just across town. You as parents want to be close to getting your kids. Unfortunately, we have a transportation problem on the south and the west side of town. Many of our kids are spending long time on the bus right now. I have kids that start at Cerrillos in Madrid and get bused into Santa Fe. So let's not be, it sounds like a nice, easy thing to do. Just rezone and bus. Maybe we bus from the schools that need to be closed and bus them into other schools. Folks, I know you love your small schools, and I would love to give every kid a small school. But I will always vote in favor of giving our kids the best educational practices we can afford. And we can't do it all. And so I am willing to take a vote because, I know where my vote is. I've been very honest with this community. And, I have listened to this community, just like when I listened to this community on closing Capshaw and DeVargas. I can tell you, Capshaw was a school that I represented, and the vote was 4-1 to consolidate them. The reason I can say our boardroom was packed. There wasn't a handful of people that wanted that consolidation. But at that time, I thought it was wrong, morally wrong, to let DeVargas wither on the vine. Those kids weren't getting the best education we could have offered them. So we consolidated the two schools. I can tell you, my Capshaw community was adamantly opposed to it. Sometimes we have to make changes, and changes are hard. I do believe that Milagro was the right way to go, and I think we'll see, advantages. We need a little bit of give and take. It shouldn't always be, and I'm sad that board member Secretary Garcia is not here. We need a little give and take. And folks, it's not fair to ask the south and the west side of town to always be doing the giving. I want our staff not to be stretched so thin. I want to be able to afford the things that I think some of you applauded for. I want to give our employees $15 an hour. We can't get there. We just can't. And, I love all of this pie in the sky about money coming down from the legislature. You read the paper just as I do. This extra that we're getting in oil and gas, higher education is looking for a sum. Pre-K is looking for a sum. I can tell you there's not one, well, maybe there's one, but the majority of the 89 school districts in New Mexico that won the lawsuit, and I give this board courage because we were a critical part of getting that lawsuit. We sued the state. We fought for our kids, but we still don't have enough money for our kids. And so we have to do with what we have. And I want to be able to position our school district for pre-K. We can't do that without, it's just not. The other thing that Board Member Carrillo said is there's $10 million for the early college opportunity. So for people that don't know that acronym, that's a career tech program. The $10 million is just a starting point. They need more than $10 million. So that, the bond is going to be eaten up. We've got major construction right now at Capitol and Santa Fe High. And we have Ortiz Middle School that those kids need changes to their facilities. I don't think our taxpayers, we asked them to raise their taxes the last time, but we can't keep on asking this community to raise their taxes. So, what? Yes, we did, on the last bond.
The last bond we did.
Yes, GEO bond. Yeah, we asked on the GEO bond, we raised taxes. And we're thankful that the community supported that. But we can't keep on asking the community to keep on raising taxes. Yes, we have some people that can probably afford it, but we have many of our community that's living paycheck to paycheck. So I'm willing to take a vote tonight, and so I will second the motion. And I guess the motion is to take closures off the table.
Yeah, just specifically, Nava, EJ, Sekia, to take it off the table and moving any discussions forward, not to have that be an option. Correct. No.
If I may, let's stick with the format of the board, where it is my role. I went to a training in Philadelphia and for new board presidents at a national convention, and one of the things they said was high controversy, high structure. So we're going to stick to that. Did you want to comment further, Board Member Carrillo?
Well, sometimes Ms. Cashman and I, we disagree. And I'm hoping that you obviously fall down on the side of finally making a decision and taking these schools off the whiteboard, if you will, and then moving forward with plans for transportation and rezoning, because I truly believe that that is the best course for the district. Relative to money, so every percentage increase for staff around the district is about $850,000. All right? And just the idea, I want to go to 15 also. We should, you're right, that is, I think Ms. Noble said, that's the move nationally. I can't remember the slogan they use, but it's for 15. And, but there's understanding what's within the realm of possibility with us and what unfortunately falls to the roundhouse. And we know better than most that the phrase that I used, and I wrote this, and it was on, on the radio and elsewhere. It's like, this was no moonshot. This was more like a bottle rocket in terms of the money they gave. Okay, so don't go patting yourselves on the back. You didn't do anybody any favors. And in the idea that they even think it's a favor, that they're doing somebody, to give teachers, a little bit of what they really deserve, is insulting. And so that's why I believe, not in coming from scarcity, but in saying that in the next 2 to 4 years, there's going to be a turn, I believe, in the roundhouse that will start to make education a financial priority. With that, the other thing we have to do, no matter what, to prevent anything bad from happening, and I've mentioned this, I mentioned it at the legislature and at the State School Board Association meeting as well, we have to have, it won't happen this legislature, but the next one, a Holds Education Harmless Act. So that if we do see revenue drop for the state of New Mexico, they can't say, let's take it from the public schools. That's the biggest part of our budget, because that's what they typically do. They say, okay, well, if this is 45% of the budget, let's just take from there. It's like, no. So we need to have that. But we can take a vote on whether or not to take these schools now. I don't know if there's any other comment at all.
So yes, if you're finished, I have some comments. To me, this is not a conversation about closing schools, because I really do believe that culture is king and that we have to be really careful. And I have not seen the case that says we have to close schools. I simply haven't. To me, this is an opportunity to reimagine things and to transform. So I am perfectly happy to take closing schools off the table. However, I guess I don't understand how that can work, given that we have a school board election and we'll have in 3 weeks. And frankly, without Secretary Garcia, I don't know how this board can take a meaningful vote. And if there was a meaningful vote, frankly, it would have to be Secretary Garcia, Vice President Price, and myself voting to take it off the table. And we could only do that for 2 years, the remainder of our terms, because at any given time, a board can make a decision, a financial decision. So, you know, I would and do support us taking that off the table. I think we need to define a period of time, and I think we need to be realistic about it, but I don't think we can take a meaningful vote. And I think we have to do this in a way that, you know, frankly doesn't feel political, but that is a real assurance to the community with the cycles and, you know, all of what we have to do in mind. I would like to take it off the table. And I would like us to engage in transforming our system. I would like us to, and I appreciate all that you have said, Board Member Carrillo, about how we can do the bond and maintain schools and all of that. And Dr. Garcia and I have had discussions to that effect, that, you know, we can decide that we are going to maintain schools as best we can. This community has shown the will to have small schools before. We get dinged on the Legislative Finance Committee audit because we haven't closed schools. And, you know, Dr. Garcia stood up and very articulately said, we have responded to the will of the community. And this board has wrestled with this before. But again, you know, I just don't see how, I mean, it's sort of one of these things in politics. I'm not going to vote against taking it off the table, because that vote implies that I am in favor of leaving it on the table. However, I don't consider this a realistic and meaningful motion right now. Board Member Carrillo, then Board Member Cashman.
I mean, of course, I disagree with your last characterization. I think it's very meaningful because I think it shows this, not only school communities affected. I would say to Suke, I mean, they've got to be like sitting on the sidelines thinking, are we next? They probably sit on some of the most valuable property that we have. We just rebuilt that place, and there's only 85 kids there. And so, but what it does is it shows that the board has resolve. And I would say that the next thing that has to happen is having a study session to talk about, okay, what's next? How do we want to plan for this next? But then, of course, the good thing about taking the step tonight is these are not on the table. That's not going to be part of the study session. That's why it's a meaningful vote. In terms of, I want 5 people here, honestly, based on what's happened in the last 3 months, I don't know if we're ever going to have 5 people here for the rest of I just don't know. And so it's incumbent upon the 4 of us to do whatever it is we feel we need to do. I don't, because God forbid, I don't know if he's ill or whatever the reason was tonight, but you know, on the 6th, we could very well have somebody absent as well. And so that can't, you know, prevent us from making a decision. When a bunch of people, because it's election season in the House, are not there to take substantive votes, they take the vote anyway. You know, and the people are probably dinged for not being there for an important vote. In terms of how can we take this now, 2 years from now, there's another board, I would say, yeah, they're going to be tied to our decision unless they come up with a darn good reason to overthrow it and take things to the community. Just the way we are, in a sense, tied to our policy decision and resolution from 2012 committing to small school sizes. Okay, that passed unanimously in 2012. And I would say that before we even had to consider closing anything else, we'd have to go back and rescind that policy and resolution. So that's going to have to happen first. But your boards always have the opportunity to reverse a previous board's decision. But I would say by at least now, study sessions and things moving forward would take this off the table. That's why I would consider it meaningful, to use your word. And that's why I respect the 2.5 years that you've been here, Ms. Noble, but the reason I would say also, I would say in 8.5 years having gone through this, I don't necessarily want to go through this again, and experience shows me that we don't necessarily have to.
Board Member Cashman.
A motion has been made, it has been seconded. I find it very offensive that you discount votes of other board members. We are elected officials. We hold this position until December 31st. I will continue to make votes as an elected official until I vacate the board on December 31st. It is within my power. It is not within a new board. So, and unfortunately, Board Member Garcia, Secretary Garcia, has not been here multiple times. I think the board is going to have to move forward without his vote. And unfortunately, it's that, and I could probably use his vote right now because he sits on the south side of town. But I think we are ready to, the motion was made to take school closures off the table. There was a second. So I think we need to take the vote, and I would appreciate that you not discount the vote of 2 board members that their positions are up for re-election. I think all of us, and I don't usually talk about politics that much up here, but I think we all found it was highly inappropriate when we had a Supreme Court nominee and the Senate would not honor President Obama's choice. They needed to take the vote. Instead, they held up that vote, and Merrick Garland never had a fair hearing. I don't know how you feel, but I found that is anything but undemocratic, and so our votes is still important until we leave the board, because then you could say, well, the next board doesn't, the minute they get on the board, there's going to be another election in 2 years. So you and Board Member Price cannot vote because that's not how it works in politics. That's not how it works as an elected official. So I am ready to take the vote tonight.
Okay. We have a motion and a second, and I appreciate what you are saying, Board Member Cashman. I simply do feel that, honestly, saying for what period of time, I mean, if it's off the table forever, I am trying to be realistic here, and you are absolutely an elected official and a meaningful voting member of this board, and I would agree with, Board Member Carrillo's previous comments in that personally, and I've thought about it a great deal, I think we're going to miss you a lot and the work that you do. And so in no way do I want to diminish, and did I mean to, and I apologize if that was what it felt like to you, because that is not my intent. I am simply trying to explain how I see this motion being made and my concerns about it. I know how I will vote, and I'm perfectly happy for us to vote now. Board Member Carrillo.
Just that Ms. Cashman brought up something about Rudy not being here, and because he's on the south side, it may have aligned with her vote or whatever. I would pose to Rudy, remember that time that, that's what I mean, Secretary Garcia, remember that time that Clint Eastwood in the debates spoke to the empty chair as if he was talking? That just came up to me right now. I wanted to talk to the empty chair there. But I would say to Rudy, my thing about Secretary Garcia, I'm sorry, because we're also friends watching football sometimes, but you're absolutely right. Ms. Price, I agree with you completely. And so, but that this benefits the South Side because it distributes these kids that want to go to other schools. It benefits a lot of these parents by providing the transportation so that they can, in fact, make other choices relative to their schools.
Okay, I think it would also be in that we are all representing individual districts. We are all sitting here in our own right. I think none of us can assume how Secretary Garcia would vote. So let's not presuppose that because he's not here to vote, so he won't be voting on this. We have a motion and a second. We will do this as a roll call. Board Member Carrillo. Can we read the motion one more time? If you can go back there. The motion was to take closing schools, specifically named 3, not others, but 3, Nava, EJ, and Acequia Madre, off the table. Yeah. Correct? And that was seconded. Yes, ma'am. And there is no time frame or any other conditions placed on that?
No, I think that can all be done, accomplished in study sessions.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Board Member Carrillo.
Yes.
Board Member Cashman.
No.
Vice President Price.
Before I make my vote, I just want to say one quick thing. I've been with this district since 1989 as a teacher, an assistant principal, a principal, and a board member. I have been fighting the de facto segregation in this district since 1989, and I'm totally frustrated about it. I will put my statement together for the next school board meeting. I vote no.
And I vote yes. There's a tie, so the motion fails. Okay, can we move on? At this stage, I would suggest, if it is all right with the rest of the board, that we invite the union president to do the union update. Is that okay? Any objections? If you're a parent, I'd like for you to stay. To repeat that into a microphone, the union president, Grace Mayer, says if you're a parent, she'd love it if you'd stay.
Okay.
Ms. Mayer, welcome.
Hi. Well, good evening. I'm Grace Mayer, the NEA Santa Fe president, and teacher at Milagro Middle School, a recently merged middle school that went through a lot of contentious debate, and all sides were ignored, just so you know. So the first thing I wanted to say, and why I asked a few parents to stay, was that when we talk about extending the school year or year-round schools, the model for year-round schools are 189 days, not 195 or 200 that's being proposed. So I want you to know that there's models in California and other states where basically you go to school for a semester and then you have 2 weeks off. So the 8 weeks or 7.5 weeks that we have off in the summer are really just put in the school year, and the school is extended over 12 months, but you're actually only going to school. We have a contract for 182 days. The kids go for last 178. And so extending instructional days by 25 days is a lot. And it's not a year-round school model that I am aware of. And I also want to mention that some of our schools that are smaller schools are going to have the most challenging circumstances when it comes to K-5 plus or this extended year or whatever, because if you have a one-round school, which means you only have one teacher for each grade level in some of these small schools, if more than 60% have to agree to do those programs to get the money, then you're out of like available staff to commit to that. You also have to have a nurse and some counselors and other people there. So that's one of the challenges of what happened with some of our things at our schools, although we certainly applied for it and we applaud the superintendent for doing that and trying to get resources and more education to our students. But the logistics of that and having staff do that is a lot more difficult than I think parents and the community are thinking. And, you know, if a school has an extended program, but then you, as a parent of schools, of children in another school, and they don't have that extended program, then your child doesn't have any, you know, adult supervision for that 25 days. So I think that we need to start looking at how these things are impacting the staff and these decisions that are being made. I also want to mention that I think I may have started this whole thing. And one of the reasons I did is because some of our schools that have invested in our infrastructure and are starting to move teachers around because some of their classes are not fully enrolled. So you might have 15 kids and you can have up to 27 in one grade level, or 22. And so they're doing combo classes, and for schools like a K-8 to only have a one-round school in their elementary is not okay. You need to have a second teacher. You need to have the capacity in the school, and when you're investing, literally, you haven't fully rebuilt those schools, and we've invested millions, you don't want to take the staff out to go to another school that doesn't have a teacher. And that's a lot smaller and is the one-round school. But there's a need, and that's what happened sort of at the beginning of the year. I also think that, as a board, I think it's a little irresponsible to not look at your policy and realize that if there was some circumstance where the structural foundation of the building collapsed, you would close the school. I mean, there is going to be some reasonable explanation to have that as an option. But we talked about repurposing, and I'd like to know from the board about what are you telling the community when you're saying we're going to vote not to close? Are you saying we're not going to reconfigure it? Is it going to maintain its integrity as a K-5 school, or are you going to transform it into an early childhood center? Because to some people, that's a closure. So I think, I've been around for over 20 years, and I've worked with Ms. Price and other people on the board, and I've taught Board Member Cashman's children who are now in college. And she went on the CRC as a parent of opinion students, twins, that were overcrowded. That school was completely overcrowded. We didn't have enough rooms. We didn't have spaces. We had like 15, 18 portables. It was insane. We had 780 students, and I taught every one of them until I became the president of the union to literally get the numbers of the art of students I could see in a week down. Because there were schools, like Wood Gormley or other schools, had 300 students, and I had 780. And I said, wow, that's not fair, right? And so, we managed that. We worked through that. We didn't have art spaces. We had a portable with no water. I took buckets for 7 years to a portable. Trust me when I tell you that our facilities were a complete mess. And so we got on those committees to try to provide equity, to try to get, a school like, Milagro built, a school like Piñon built, beautiful library, other experiences that children weren't getting because this infrastructure was so bad. So we're, with the luck of the community being for our bonds and always voting 3-1 for or 2-1 for, we've had the luxury to build. But now we have to look at, okay, where's our money being spent on staff and programming, and when things happen, how do we resolve them for the students in the building? So, going to combo classes at some schools is not okay, because we fought to try to get that changed, because it's a strain on the teacher, it's a strain on the child. A teacher has to do 2 curriculums. And so, yeah. I mean, so is it fair to say to someone that's at a small school, because you have a one-round teacher, one-round school, and you only have 15 second graders, that someone else has 27 and they're a combo class? I mean, that's what equity means to the employee and to the teacher and to the EA and to the principal too. I mean, because, you know, if you can't find these people to work in the building either, you're collapsing classes and other people, you're getting students throughout the year. You know, we had a teacher that decided not to work, you know, at our school anymore and left. The elective was distributed. And so we got, you know, 5 or 8 new students in each class. And for the guitar teacher, you know, he has 37. That's a lot. But, you know, when there's other programs and there's 20 kids in a guitar class in another school, or 15 or 9, you know, how is that equitable? And so when I hear the word equity, I don't know what people are talking about, because my perspective is so skewed on what it means to like run programming. And I'm happy to hear the board is talking about putting programming first, because a middle school, a K-8, different programming. High school, different programming. You need to have, you know, even though you might only have 7 kids in a French class at Santa Fe High, you have to have the French class because they need it for college. You have to take 5 years of a language. I mean, there's certain things you have to consider. You can't just look at numbers and look at students and say, okay, let's divide by 22 or 27 or 23, because they never works out like that. And when you have certain programming, it doesn't. And also, children are funded differently. ELL learners get more resources from the SEG. And that's, you know, kindergarten get more resources too. That's why we have lower numbers, and also an EA that's guaranteed after 15. So I appreciate the engagement of the parents and the people that are here, but I hope that you bring that every time you come when we talk about budget and also resources, not just on bricks and mortar. Because I think it's easy to say, you know, well, it's not easy, because I did it and I was here for DeVargas to promote that school to keep it open. And I'm glad that we picked the location that we did. It's centrally located. It makes more sense. It's a beautiful structure now, but it was really difficult, and we're still transitioning. And these things take time. But Aspen is also a consolidated school from Alvord and from Connie. And they don't have the consistency of a principal. They've had, like, I don't know how many in so many years. But to lose staff that were committed to that school and to then make combo classes and do other stuff, I don't think it's fair to them. And I wish somebody was here from some of those schools who are, you know, also on the other side of what that looks like. Because it's really hard to tell families, okay, well, this smaller school, it's not even really about the population in the school. But Tesuque was rebuilt, and its location, it's why it stays open. We've always had a relationship with the Pueblo. It was always a school that we were going to attract people from Pewaukee, and for a time that happened. And kids that were from the Pueblos up there went to Tesuque. And when Pewaukee rebuilt their schools and got a stable kind of superintendent and other things, they went back, which makes sense. But I'm just saying, like, it's not about the number of the students. The infrastructure for some of these schools has to be rebuilt. And the reality is, we're not going to rebuild 5 elementary schools. And I think it's disingenuous for some people to say that we're going to do that. I mean, we don't have the teachers or the capacity to do it. We don't have the principals to run these schools. So I know this isn't even in my purview, but it is, because I get calls from teachers and staff and crying, why am I leaving? What are we doing? Why are we collapsing this program? Why am I being involuntary transferred? You know, what are the numbers on this? What's the policy? But beyond that too, I mean, they need an environment where they can thrive. When people feel they can't thrive and do their best work, they leave. And we see that all over. And we have now, I think, in our superintendent, really great leadership in terms of what she knows about, how to make a budget work, what resources we need to keep programs afloat, and also the building and infrastructure needs and what those programmatic needs look like. I mean, we're lucky to have a superintendent that's knowledgeable. And so I agree with, our President Noble that we need vision and a repurposing of schools and sites and programs to make a really thriving community. But we can't leave out the workers. We have a shortage of bus drivers. We have a transportation issue because we don't have enough people to drive buses. So they're doubling up on routes. So the length of a route is going from 30 minutes to 40 minutes to 65 minutes because they're dropping off school kids along the way. So, I mean, if you need a job, I think we have some, if you're a bus driver. I mean, we certainly have some vacancies in middle school math, if anybody is so inclined. But I think that we need to come together as a community and have a little bit of a reality check about what's possible. I'm an artist, I'm a creative thinker. I want to know what's possible too. But then the practical thing is, can we sustain it, and what are we obligated to do to provide the education that we're given money to, right, from the state to educate children? What is the programming needs and requirements, and then how do we get people to fill those jobs and feel that they're doing their best work? So I'm going to get off the box now and say that we did have, we interviewed for our candidates for our school board, and we're going to make recommendations of endorsements tomorrow. And we're actually probably going to see Secretary Garcia tomorrow too. He's running unopposed, but we're going to talk to him as our ARs, our association reps in the building. But thank you for those of you who stayed. And that's my update for this evening.
Thank you very much. Okay, I appreciate the board agreeing to move that. I figured Ms. Mayer's comments might have been best placed after that discussion. But now we are on item D of board discussion and possible action, city and county notification to the district of building projects impacting schools. Board Member Carrillo.
So there were two things. Did we have superintendent announcements tonight? Oh, I see. It's all the orders kind of winky-winky. I don't know why that came out. So this was around being notified by the county when someone even comes to them for approval to consider building. So when I go up and down Rodeo all the time because I live in that area, and those apartments, what are they called, like Broad Street Rodeo or Broadstone Rodeo. Watch, they're going to start calling it Broadstone Rodeo. But Broadstone Rodeo. And I don't recall that ever coming to us or us being ever notified. Now, granted, they're expensive, but I got to wonder how many kids are going to be there and how that's going to affect Chaparral and EJ, right? The building, what? Well, I know how expensive the ones are by the Whole Foods because they're $2,000 for a 2-bedroom, they're $1,400 for a 1, and $1,000 for a studio. Woo! So you get to live near a Whole Foods and the rail station, and then you know the people that are going to rent those are going to just rent them out as Airbnbs and vacation rentals. I mean, the city's done, anyway, that's a whole other issue. But so, no, I don't need to know how expensive they are. I know they're very expensive. My concern is how many kids are there and what's going to be the effect on schools. And so that's what you were going to follow up on, because I was asking that question about, do we still have that kind of agreement? And like, I'm curious about what's happening out in Las Saleras and out past El Camino, so we can plan, for those things as well.
Madam President? Madam President, members of the board directed me, I can't remember if it was 6 months ago, maybe it was last spring, that I wrote a letter to, I think you all got copies of it, to the city, the mayor, and the county manager. And we are getting notifications now on a regular basis, and Mr. Romero does attend meetings. But in my tenure, which started in 2016, I think August, I think, of 2016 or July of 2016, I do not remember ever being notified of that particular complex. That doesn't mean didn't happen, but I don't remember that. It would seem that if it got built now, that those plans probably were approved many years before my tenure. But I'm going to defer to either Mr. Romero or Ms. Wagner. They're shaking their head that they were not notified. But I know that now they're very regular about that, about notifying us when there are plans.
Board Member Cashman.
And so, you know, I've been on that, you know, fighting developments but to answer your first question about the Broadstone Rodeo, those will be luxury apartments, 188 units, none are affordable. They will be using a market rate. They expect a one-bedroom with 666 square feet to go to $1,300 a month. They will have 94 one-bedrooms, 64 two-bedrooms, and 30 three-bedrooms. And their target audience are millennials and baby boomers downsizing. And they keep on emphasizing these are luxury apartments. So and there are other ones that, you know, I've got a whole list of them here. But more to the point that Board Member Carrillo is bringing up, you know, I know the city and the county are required to notify us about projected plans. I think we shouldn't just be signing off and saying, yeah, we have space. We need these developers to be giving us money. Now, Las Solares, I understand, but, you know, it's a different situation. I don't want to talk too much about it. But in order to build that, they were required to come up with, you know, it's in their interest to give us land for a school because that's a good marketing ploy, but they are required. So for all of these other smaller things, we should be asking, you know, for something from them. You know, I mean, they may say no, but it would help us as a district, whether they give, just like in order to avoid the affordable units, they give the city an impact fee. We should be getting something from them, because just because they're building them doesn't mean that that school that is zoned for it really has enough room. And there are a lot of apartments. There are going to be another group of apartments by the Santa Fe Place Mall. Las Solares is also building, again, luxury apartments. So we're getting a lot more apartments, but nobody is building affordable except for Oshara. And Oshara, that's homes, but they do have some plans to build affordable homes with HomeWise and Habitat for Humanity. But, so I don't know what we can do, but instead of just signing off, maybe we can say, well, yeah, but there's an impact to our district, you know. So it might be something we might want to think about in the future.
Madam President, on that point,
Dr.
we aren't signing off. I mean, we're not. I mean, we're just notified at this point. So we haven't gotten anything yet to even sign off on.
Yeah, we are supposed to be signing.
Yes, but that I don't think that since we have put this into place, and you know, there has not been a project that's come through that we've been asked to even sign off on.
Okay.
But the other piece that I just want to mention is that, and maybe things have changed in Albuquerque, but when they were doing developments, the school districts got impact fees. And it was something that was either passed through the city or the county. So I don't know what that governance structure is in Santa Fe County, if that is even allowable, you know, I don't know.
And just to be clear, impact fees are paid, and they, at least from the city perspective, are for the impact on infrastructure. For affordable housing, it's called a fee in lieu. that they pay into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Board Member Carrillo.
Fee in lieu. Okay, so I would support us looking into that further. Whether or not we have the ability to charge impact fees or assess impact, I'd love us, it would seem like that would behoove us. And then also I'm curious, and I don't know that we would have the answer to this, but in all of these units, is there anything in leases that prevents all of these people who are renting these units from instantly subletting them as vacation rentals? Because I can see easily, since they're luxury, I can see easily, especially them doing that. And I'm just curious, because that doesn't do anything to help the housing challenges in Santa Fe. And certainly with rents like that, doesn't do anything to help our teachers or anyone that just makes, a modest living.
Vice President Price.
This is just falling off my radar, but we used to be, when they were going to develop, they would offer us land for a school. And then we voted on whether we were going to take that land or not. And I remember we voted down two horrible choices. They were going to give us something right next to a storage unit. And we said no. Remember that? So can we follow up on that too?
We will.
So, and it sounds as if we need some understanding as to, and I wonder if there's a size requirement, because I think both Los Solares and Tierra Contenta were required to give parcels. So, what the land use governance is around that and just how it relates to us. So, sounds like we'd like some guidance on. Dr.
Madam
Garcia.
President, members of the board, there's several related issues, and we will work on that and then bring back to the board just sort of a package response on all of these pieces.
Thank you. Okay, board announcement and follow-up. Board Member Cashman.
If anybody has anything for board discussion, then
that's what she just brought up.
Okay. For the next time, board discussion and possible action. Board Member Carrillo.
I don't have anything right now, but I'm just procedurally, I was just thinking that we should do that, even though it's earlier than usual.
Okay. On board announcement and follow-up, Board Member Cashman.
I usually don't make political announcements from the board, but I was informed by Vice President Price that there will be a candidate forum for school board members at 6 p.m. at the Higher Education Center on Thursday. And I think it's important to make it because I live in one of those districts, and we have heard nothing about District 2 candidates. So hopefully people that are listening will know that if they want to hear before they vote who the people are, please go 6 p.m. Thursday at the Higher Education Center. It's on Siringo. It's sort of like across from Santa Fe High is how I would describe it, sort of in between Lafarge and there's Lafarge, there's the Higher Education Center, and the Santa Fe High.
Siringo and Yucca. Can't miss it.
Any other board announcements?
In keeping with athletics, as I always do. So football season's coming to a close. Two things coming up. November 1st, Santa Fe High and Capitol playing each other at Capitol. And then if you're really interested in high school football, which of course I am, a deciding game, a decisive game is going to be this Friday night where Capitol takes on Del Norte. And if Capitol beats Del Norte, they could very well end up winning district. So Santa Fe is going to be at Los Alamos, but I think the game of the week is at Milne Field in Albuquerque, Capitol and Del Norte. Milne Field. Got it.
And I just would say it's school carnival time, which is a great time to visit schools. So check out when your neighborhood Halloween carnival is at schools, because they're often a lot of fun. Board Member Cashman.
And I just have another announcement, which I forgot. This is a time where our seniors in our high schools are applying for college. If you know seniors, encourage them to apply. You know, fill out the application to UNM or to Santa Fe Community College. There are also scholarships available, and also for all of our parents, the free application for student aid, which is financial aid, that opened on October 1st. So these are all ways to make college affordable for our kids. Los Alamos' scholarship is open, or will be open in a couple of weeks, the Daniel Scholarship. So our high schools should be telling all our kids about this, but if you see a grandparent or a family, tell them this is a time to start applying, especially for our kids that might want to go out of state. Some of our surrounding schools offer in-state tuition. So, you know, it's just really important to help them get on their right foot, and whether that's to go to this four-year college, a two-year college. Santa Fe Community College is probably the best game in town for affordability and offering a lot of great programs for our kids.
And that application is more commonly known as FAFSA. I didn't even know what the unpacked version was, but Board Member Cashman just said it, free application for student aid. Fill out the FAFSA. Okay, Superintendent announcements and follow-up. Dr. Garcia.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I only have one tonight just because I knew it was going to be a long meeting. Staff and I met with the LFC staff again today. It's a continuing conversation and an opportunity for not only Santa Fe but other districts. I think you've heard a little bit about Albuquerque, and I wish that Ms. Mayer was here so she could hear this part. We are going to be meeting with her, but the state wants to expand the opportunities for K-5 plus all the way to K-12 plus, adding an additional 25 days to the school year. We've played around with some models where we're looking at 20 days at the beginning of the school year, and then adding minutes. There's so many different ways of configuring it, but also extended learning opportunities, which we applied for this year, that provides after-school programming for many families, makes a big difference. It's a very it's an interesting concept of either district-wide or school-wide, right? So the whole school might be a K-5, a K-8 plus, let's say, or even a K-12 plus. So we've looked at different models. We've looked at the cost modeling, and you know, it is an issue of changing, you know, terms of employment, right? And so it would require some buy-in from the union around this issue. Obviously, it would be best, but also being able to communicate with our families to gauge interest and support. And we have somewhat of a compressed timeline. We are projecting our numbers high, and we have until November 6th to submit them. There's no harm, no foul if we don't make those numbers. But it is an amazing opportunity, and I think it could be a real game changer in educational outcomes for our kids. The research that they have on fidelity to the program, where the kids have their receiving teacher, and if you have an entire school, it makes it much easier than if we're, you know, trying to piece together. And if teachers knew ahead of time that school X, Y, and Z were going to be that kind of an extended learning school, or they would be more inclined to want to be there. It would be a great thing for our families and for planning. The problem is we won't know again until really late, which, you know, if you're going to get funded for it or not, because they won't know until after spring budget workshop. So I'm just putting this out there, it's nothing for you to decide, but I don't, you know, because we have such compressed time, to be able to figure out. So we're going to meet to figure out what's the best strategy. We'll probably try to work some of this into the study session next Tuesday. We have one of the Finance Committee study session. And so this does relate to finances, so I think we can legitimately work that into the discussion. But I think I just lost my train of thought. It's an important part to this. I lost my train of thought. Can any of my staff read my mind where I was going? You guys do a pretty good job with that. Anybody? Well, it'll come to me later. But we do want to look at that. We're also going back and forth with legislative staff on validation of the costs. We think it's going to cost more than they think it's going to cost. And so we would be looking at, they want to see our assumptions that we made in figuring out what the cost would be. The other piece that I want to say is that most likely what we would do, you know how we always put out the regular calendar, and we typically, according to policy, it just comes to the board as an FYI, not for approval. But with the extended learning, it's such a big deal that I really do feel that regardless, you all should be able to weigh in on it. But what we would do is to put two calendars once we get feedback from parents and communities that this is the calendar should we get picked, and this is the calendar, just the regular schedule, so that at least families can plan some vacation and have a good sense of this is the way the calendar would look. So bring you more detailed information at the study session.
Board Member Cashman, then Board Member Carrillo.
On the calendar, could we maybe, I mean, I know we don't weigh into it, you have a group, but I think I heard from someone that maybe we need 2 days in the fall for our teachers, so they're not getting us burnt out. And so could you suggest that to the calendar committee and see if they might be amenable?
We're feeling that as well. And I think this is something that we talked to the LFC about today, that I'm seeing more behavior that you normally see around April with faculty feeling tired. And I wonder if some of that has to do with that extended learning calendar. So I want to go back and see, is there any correlation between individuals that may be, you know, at their wits' end and have exhibiting behaviors that we wouldn't want, and does it tie from not having had as long of a break? As we look at this calendar, we're very cognizant that we think, you know, instead of a day, maybe we need a 4-day weekend in the fall, just that little break before the winter holiday. So more to come on that.
Board Member Carrillo.
Okay, so on this issue, because it's funny because we talk about K-5 plus and all of this, there's two terms that we seem to use, extended learning, which is all this stuff, and then year-round schools. I know them as being distinctly different, okay? And that's not what Ms. Mayer was saying. So I understand year-round schools being year-round. It's not something you opt out to go on vacation and have a good time or whatever. School happens to be, you have a semester at a time with 2-week breaks. And that's when you're in school. And everybody does it. It's not optional. So, I mean, in keeping what Ms. Noble was saying earlier and about this whole idea of re-envisioning maybe something new, I know that Linda Trujillo brought this up a number of times as it may be something to look at, because it's that 3-month period, or actually maybe 10-week period, where kids fall back. You know, and the thing about the way the legislature is trying to get into the education business, besides funding, is they're really hamstringing us, whether it's K-12 plus or K-3 plus. They're hamstringing us with this whole idea of this teacher has to follow the kids to the next grade. Because what if this person doesn't want to go to grade 4, wants to stay at grade 3? I mean, just whatever it might be, you know. And so, anyway, it's just the distinction between the two.
It is different, and you could create, we looked at it, you could create a model with the additional 25 days that looks like a year-round calendar where you're off, I don't know, on 6, off 2, or whatever. I think it would be very difficult for us just to go into something like that because the community is not quite ready. The childcare providers and whatnot. But the idea of the kid having the teacher, it's really the teacher that would be receiving the child. But nonetheless, some teachers don't want to teach that way. And so my guess is, if I had a crystal ball, that it's probably going to be certain schools that will choose it. But I think it's a good idea to have that conversation, because there might be support from the entire community to do that. And our kids would really be the benefactors, particularly on the recoupment and retention issue, and especially children in poverty are doubly impacted when they come back. They're further behind than their higher socioeconomic peers.
So on board announcements, on super announcements, you're going to follow up on...
Hang on that point.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go.
I just want to say, just to sort of point out that the LFC is asking us to listen to our families, not just say we're deciders and we make decisions. They're actually asking if we're going to transition to this particular thing. Just to point out, it's quite clear that they want us to do that. So anyway, Board Member Carrillo.
They want
us
the five of us, or they want the district in general to look at families?
To listen to families about the transitioning and different models that they want. So this is actually coming from other places as well, as it relates to our earlier discussion. Okay, Board Member Carrillo.
So, Dr. Garcia, you were going to follow up on attendance relative to religious observances, because we have a policy that I don't know is being wholly enforced around if you take off for instance Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, it's excused, but it is not supposed to count against attendance for the purposes of, awards or recognitions. And I just want to make sure, because that's what we passed as a board, and I just want to make sure that's the way it's happening.
So, Madam President, members of the board, and my understanding around that policy, although I have not reviewed that policy per se, we do have a designation when people are absent that there is a code for religious holidays. That also includes Native American feast days and any number of days. Many of the recognitions around perfect attendance or near perfect attendance or whatnot, like Everyday Matters, those are governed outside of the district. They have their own rules around that. Within the district, they are counted as excused. However, in terms of reporting, in terms of numbers of days, the state does not recognize excused or unexcused, which is why we have a very high truancy rate, and why we aggravate people when we contact them that they've missed more than X amount of days and they get those letters, because the state does not recognize excused and unexcused absences.
So, but I would say that, for instance, on Everyday Matters, they're using our numbers, and they're using district numbers to calculate whether or not this kid has perfect attendance or not, which means that if we're just merely counting as this absence as excused, it ends up being against their perfect attendance. And the intent of our policy was to make sure that that didn't happen.
So I will go back and look and make sure. It gets really tricky on the excused absences because, and is Elias still here? Nope. It's okay. It's all right. I'll get back to Board Member Carrillo on that. I know that we do track by reason, and it was a big point, if you remember, I think you remember Ms. Cashman when we met with the Native American community, that they were not getting that same, benefit of the policy, consideration of that policy. And so we made it very clear that happens. We do have a lot of families that excuse their kids for any number of reasons that are not religious. And so then those absences really start accumulating. And so, I know that this is for religious reasons, and that makes perfect sense. And I will follow up with the people that give some of these awards.
Board Member Cashman.
Because just on and I know we all understand it, when you have a little second or third grader and they think they've got perfect attendance and they didn't get their certificate, you know, we've got kids in tears, or why couldn't I be in the raffle to get a bike or something? So we just need to, you know, control that, because they, you know, first of all, they don't decide whether they go to school, their parents do, but because we are considerate of some religions, we need to be considerate of all.
I definitely will follow up on that part of it.
Okay, moving on to the consent agenda.
I move for approval.
I second it.
Any further discussion?
Yeah.
Board Member Carrillo.
Just want to make sure, I didn't look at the minutes. I'm here for every meeting, so I don't look at this sometimes. Is it accurate in terms of attendance and October 1st?
We do follow up on that, Mr. Cuddy.
So everyone, all four of us, I'm sure, were here on October 1st, right? Okay, good, thanks. All right, thanks.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to action items. Action item A, the second reading and approval of amended policy 544, general obligation bond election and charter schools.
I move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Board Member Carrillo.
The only thing I'd like to say is to anybody that may be watching is because we're moving through these very quickly, they're second readings. We've already done all the discussion on all of this. We've already made all the changes, so we don't need to rehash it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Action item B, second reading and approval of amended policy 601, tobacco products and contractors, volunteers and visitors.
I move for approval.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Board Member Carrillo.
I would just ask that maybe in superintendent announcements, whenever, that you just let us know about the AR portion, like how we're planning on addressing certain situations. That's all. Everyone.
We also already took the picture on this one. All those in favor say aye.
Yeah. Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Okay, moving to advanced planning. We do have a finance subcommittee study session next week. And then we have a board meeting on the 6th, but not the 29th, because I guess there are that many Tuesdays in October. Yep.
It's the election day.
Election day was the second.
Well, sorry, 2 weeks from today is October 29th. So the reason we don't have a meeting on October
that's
29th
correct.
is because there are 5 Tuesdays in October.
That's correct.
And then we've moved it to Wednesday, November 6th is our following meeting because there is an election that night.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Dr. Garcia.
Just, I guess, point of professional privilege or personal privilege. I'd just like to introduce, you already know him, but Robert Martinez is our new deputy CFO.
Welcome. Congratulations. Thank you. Anything further on advanced planning? I guess we are in session on Veterans Day. There's an audit committee meeting that day.
That is correct.
Okay. That's all. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Right here. Right here. Right here. Ask her. Red Lobster? You guys owe me. Red Lobster? On the number.
I
On
said
the number.
9 as well.
I said 6.